My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 181 to 195. Chapter 181. He is your hero. The soldiers went to get the 5 silver tier warriors on Durant's orders. Those silver tier warriors were Monty Town's City Defense Force's elite soldiers. Each of them wore bronze tier armor and had a longsword in their hands. They had a commanding presence. The leader was a middle-aged man with a thick beard and a rugged face, and he had a large sword. It was a silver tier weapon that flickered with silver light. The leader of the City Defense Force's 1st Brigade, Edmond Dantes, greets Mayor Durant. The leader walked up to Durant and knelt on one knee. The armor on his body was stained with the blood of magical beasts. His eyes were filled with grief. Edmond's brother was Barca Dantes, the City Defense Force's director. He had been killed by an earth dragon when he defended the West Gate. Anna had killed the earth dragon with a gold tier spell, and that meant his brother's corpse was also burned into ashes. He had been at the West Gate. He wanted to erect a tombstone for his brother. He had just dug a hole when Durant summoned him. He hated those magical beasts because of what had happened to his brother. Why would the world have such an ugly creature? All magical beasts deserved to die. Edmond, get up. Do you know why I summoned you? Durant walked up to Edmond and reached out to help him up. I know, Lord Mayor. The guards told me that you wanted to test the magical beast's strength. Forgive me for being blunt, you're just wasting time. No matter how powerful they are, magical beasts are still animals. You want to use them instead of killing them? One day, you'll bring disaster upon yourself. Edmond stared at the tens of thousands of magical beasts in the manor as if they were the enemies. If he did not have to obey the guards in Monty Town, he would have rushed in there and killed all the magical beasts. Edmond, I can understand your feelings, but those magical beasts are domesticated beasts brought by Black Moon Castle. They're different from the wild magical beasts outside. If those beasts are strong enough, I think we can use them to fight against the magical beasts in the Misty Forest. Our City Defense Force can minimize the number of battles if those magical beasts go against each other. Without war, there would be no more casualties. Lord Mayor, do you really believe that? Edmond's gaze was sharp as he looked at Zeke and the others. In his opinion, those groups of people had bewitched Durant. Those people might have different thoughts. Those magical beasts are wild by nature. Even if we manage to tame them, there is no guarantee that they won't go crazy one day. What if they're hungry? Can anyone say for sure that they won't hurt our people? Edmond, I only want you to test those magical beasts' strength. There's no need to say so much, you don't have to consider those. But, this is an order. Very well, your order is my command. However, don't blame me if I killed them accidentally. Sigh. Durant sighed when he realized that Edmond hated those magical beasts. However, anyone who saw their brother killed by one of those magical beasts would behave the same way. That was also why he called for Edmond. At least he would not go easy on those beasts, and he was strong as well. Edmond was the strongest silver tier warrior in Monty Town. He was even stronger than his brother, who had been the City Defense Force's director. The silver tier weapon in his hand was a longsword that was worth about 200 gold coins. It was called the Razor Blade. It was exceptionally sharp, and it could cut through all armor of the same level, including magical beasts. It seems that Mr. Edmond is ready. In that case, I'll start selecting the magical beasts as well. Zeke chuckled. He ignored the hostility in Edmond's eyes and walked into the manor. More than 50,000 magical beasts in the manor raised their heads at the sight of him. Many of them opened their mouths and drooled on their sharp teeth. That was the typical reaction of any wild magical beast when they saw a living person. However, those magical beasts could only whine and lay back down on the ground when the 100 silver tier magical beasts in the center glared at them. Zeke strolled among the magical beasts. He walked calmly toward the center of the group of silver tier magical beasts. The officials and guards who trailed behind him could only gulp nervously. Even silver tier soldiers who could transform their combat aura into wings did not dare to enter like that. There were more than 50,000 magical beasts in the manor. What if one of them lost control and went crazy? What if one rushed up to Zeke and bit him? Only one bite would be enough to kill him. Young Master Zeke, are you doing that to prove that Black Moon Castle's magical beasts are strong enough and harmless? Durant wanted to send guards in to protect Zeke, but when he saw that Zeke was fine, he quickly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Fortunately, he was fine. Otherwise, Monty Town would be in trouble if Black Moon Castle's young master died on their watch. I'll choose that one. Zeke completed his selection quickly as everyone else looked at him. He chose a silver-tier magical beast in the shape of a rabbit. It was much larger than an ordinary rabbit, perhaps more than a meter long. It had a spiral-shaped horn on its head, ruby-like eyes, and mysterious patterns engraved on its fur. It had no wings to signify its silver-tier status, but its ears were big enough to cover its entire body. Its ears were its wings. It was a silver-tier magical beast, the one-horned moon rabbit. Zeke carried the magical beast and walked out of the manor. The one-horned moon rabbit stayed still obediently. It allowed Zeke to stroke its head. It had an expression of pleasure as it narrowed its eyes. Young Master Zeke, you're really a brave person. You even dared to take the magical beast without any protection. Durant stood at the manor entrance and gave Zeke a thumbs up. Then, he revealed a puzzled look and said, "But I want to ask, young Master Zeke, did you pick the wrong magical beast?" He knew that the one-horned moon rabbit was relatively docile among the silver-tier magical beasts. It was cute, so many nobles would keep it as a pet. He thought Zeke would choose the strongest magical beast to fight to show off their magical beast's strength. He did not expect the man to do the exact opposite. I did not choose the wrong one. That magical beast is enough. It would not be fair if I were to choose a stronger one. Zeke put the one-horned moon rabbit in his hand down onto the ground. Time is the essence. Let's start if your men do not have any objection. The 5 silver-tier warriors, including Edmund, clenched their fists tightly when they heard Zeke's words. Zeke had deliberately chosen the weakest magical beast to fight against them because he thought it would defeat them. Was that an insult? All of you, step back. I will take care of that magical beast. Edmund's heart burned with anger. He hated those magical beasts. He dismissed the others and went up against the one-horned moon rabbit by himself. He was prepared to attack with all his strength. He wanted to kill that one-horned moon rabbit to protect his honor as a guard. He also wanted to dispel Durant's idea of buying a magical beast. After he stepped forward, the other guards retreated to give him space. They looked at the one-horned moon rabbit with pity in their eyes. They knew Edmund's strength very well. He had a good weapon, so he could fight that silver-tier magical beast alone. How could that weak rabbit be his match? That poor silver-tiered rabbit, it was so cute, but it was also about to die. Die. Silver-tier battle skill, 12 light multi-slash. Edmund mobilized his combat aura to form a pair of wind elemental wings on his back. Then, he accelerated and rushed forward without any hesitation. The razor blade in his hand exploded with 12 rays of bright light. The rays swept across the ground like a storm and left deep ravines on the ground. That move was his famous ultimate skill. Furthermore, he had used 120% of his strength. Even if there were a mountain in front of him, he could split it open. However, the one-horned moon rabbit tilted its head and raised its furry claws. A sharp nail popped out of its feet. Crack! The sword light clashed with the nail. It caused brilliant sparks to fly. The sword light blasted the ground beside the one-horned moon rabbit, but it did not move. It was not harmed in any way. Only a tiny portion of its nail was fractured. Edmund, on the other hand, took 2 steps backward. He could not believe what he had seen. How is that even possible? He was a silver-tier warrior with good equipment. How did he only cut a few of the rabbit's nails off with his sword? Was the magical beast in front of him the one-horned moon rabbit he knew? It had to be a coincidence. Edmund's expression changed several times. He appeared to be enraged as a result of his humiliation. He slashed violently at the one-horned moon rabbit consecutively with his 12 light multi-slash skill. A green wind elemental combat aura accompanied the sword's shadow that filled the sky. The one-horned moon rabbit, on the other hand, was like a river reef. It did not move an inch. It merely extended its 2 front claws, which Edmund fixed. After that, it stretched its back claws for Edmund to fix. After a few minutes, Edmund was so tired that he was panting. The one-horned moon rabbit remained unchanged. Instead, it extended its tongue and licked the claws that had been trimmed. It looked content. Edmund's face turned pale as a result of that scene. He wanted to continue swinging his sword, but his hand trembled. Eventually, he dropped to his knees weakly. He had used up most of his strength, but he had not even caused a single wound. If he continued to fight, it would just be a waste of time. He threw his longsword dejectedly and sighed. "I admit defeat." Hiss. A flurry of gasps could be heard all around him. The most powerful silver-tier warrior in Monty Town had admitted defeat. Perhaps the rabbit was a gold-tier magical beast? Everything from Black Moon Castle has to be the top quality. Do you feel satisfied now? Zeke looked at the people around him. He said, "That one-horned moon rabbit has just achieved the silver tier." However, Black Moon Castle used a special spell to fuse it with other magical beasts to get a mutated magical beast at the peak of the silver tier. Therefore, its defense is exceptionally strong. Of course, if you are still worried, you can continue to test it. There's no need. Gerard sighed. Edmund had used his full strength to cut off the one-horned moon rabbit's nails. If the remaining silver tier warriors attacked together, would they be able to cut the fur off the one-horned moon rabbit? It seems like young Master Zeke is more outstanding than I thought. And it looks like Black Moon Castle has a unique way of nurturing talents. The magical beasts have double the strength of any beast of the same level. Such magical beasts can be sold for a few hundred gold coins each, but young Master Zeke is selling them to me for 10 gold coins. How kind and generous is that offer? I would like to thank you again on behalf of everyone in Monty Town. You are our hero, indeed. He no longer doubted that Zeke was doing business at a loss. A silver-tier magical beast could be sold for half the price of a gold-tier magical beast, and its defense would not be weaker than a gold-tier beast. A gold-tier magical beast would typically cost 1,000 gold coins, so a silver-tier magical beast would cost half of that. Zeke only charged them 10 gold coins. It was as if he wanted to give them away for free. Mayor Durant, you don't have to be so polite. We live on the border, too. We should help each other. We'll have more opportunities to work together in the future. Zeke replied politely. Furthermore, you shouldn't be thanking me. You should be thanking Watson. He used magic to fuse those magical beasts. He was also the one who let us bring them to Monty Town for sale. He is your hero. Zeke looked proud when he said that. People had praised him for this courage when he walked toward those tens of thousands of magical beasts. However, his younger brother, Watson, could fuse those magical beasts, and those creatures even submitted to him. He was 100 times better than Zeke. Chapter 182. Showing off. There are 150 silver-tier magical beasts and 3,000 bronze-tier magical beasts. They are worth 4,500 gold coins. Young Master Zeke, here is the money, please count it. Durant placed a chest full of gold coins, about half the person's height, in front of Zeke. After he saw the strength of those magical beasts that Black Moon Castle had fused, he had made up his mind to buy them. Of course, he was a cautious person, so he tested 10 more magical beasts randomly, which included 5 silver-tier and 5 bronze-tier magical beasts, respectively. Those magical beasts displayed considerable combat strength as well. The one-horned moon rabbit was the weakest of the silver-tier magical beasts, indeed. Each of the other silver-tier magical beasts could rival more than 10 silver-tier warriors of the same level. They had extraordinary defensive and offensive powers, and it was the same for the bronze-tier magical beasts. Monty Town would have about 1,000 more silver-tier warriors and tens of thousands of bronze-tier warriors, with those magical beasts included in the number. Even if the city defense force did not roll out, that would be enough to ensure their survival during the winter. Mayor Durant, are you sure about the number of gold coins here? Zeke opened the box and took a look. It was filled with gold coins. Under the light, they reflected a bright light. At a rough glance, it looked like there were 30,000 gold coins in it. An hour had passed since they tested the magical beasts, and everyone had returned to the city hall. The building was decorated with lanterns and banners. Long tables filled with delicacies were placed in their workroom. Gerald decided to treat them to a feast due to Black Moon Castle's contribution. Dozens of manor owners and officials were there as well. However, Edmund was not there. He had fought with the one-horned moon rabbit, and then he had claimed that he did not feel well and wanted to go home to recuperate. He was humiliated. He was a silver-tier warrior who could only cut the nails of magical beasts of the same level. He felt that he had no reason to stay. That's right, young Master Zeke. That money is to pay for all the things we wanted. Geraint stretched out his finger and calculated for Zeke. The magical beasts cost 4,500 gold coins, and we also wanted to buy 10 giant rock golems. So, that's 14,500 gold coins. Other than that, we also wanted the high-quality weapons and armor that you mentioned. It should be around 30,000 gold coins. His thoughts changed when he learned Black Moon Castle's magical beasts were of high quality. He imagined that he could equip all his soldiers with a complete set of silver-tier equipment. Then, with those magical beasts of the same tier and the giant rock golems, they could kill any magical beast with just a single punch. Why would he be afraid of winter? He could even charge into the misty forest and destroy those magical beasts' lairs. He wanted to think about how to make Monty Town stronger. He wanted to earn more achievements and then return to his family to be placed in an important position. He had the winter to thank for that. If the season had not crept up so suddenly, he would not have been able to get Black Moon Castle's help. When he returned from the West Gate, he asked his men and learned that the people from Black Moon Castle had only gone to Monty Town. They had not contacted the other 3 towns on the border. That was a great opportunity. If he could ally with Black Moon Castle, he would leave the other towns far behind. That was also why he bought magical beasts worth 4,500 gold coins, but he decided to give more to Zeke. He wanted to show goodwill to them. The banquet went on in an orderly manner while Geraint did the transaction with Zeke. I thought that Edmund was strong, but it seemed like I had overestimated his ability. He also has his weapon, the razor blade. Perhaps we should call it a nail blade instead. Don't say that. Edmund is strong, but our magical beasts are stronger. Other silver-tier warriors would not have broken through their defenses either. Don't say that. Edmund's strength is still quite strong. It's just that the magical beasts brought over from Black Moon Castle are stronger. If there were any other silver-tier warriors, they wouldn't be able to break through their defenses. A few City Hall officials chatted and laughed together. They looked relaxed. Initially, they had not been able to absolve themselves from the blame for Monty Town's damages. However, the benefits that Monty Town had obtained were more than enough to make up for that. Black Moon Castle had sold them silver-tier magical beasts for only 10 gold coins, and they could sell them for hundreds of gold coins. They had already decided to buy as many items from Black Moon Castle as possible. They could sell the surplus and distribute some to those who had suffered injuries during the battle. They would be able to earn a lot of money. They could compensate those who were injured, and they could give them more benefits too. Monty Town would prosper, and everyone would be happy. At that moment, the officials were no longer feeling conflicted about Black Moon Castle. Instead, they wanted to curry favor with them. They knew that Black Moon Castle was rich and powerful. They did not care about those things at all. They even fawned over those 10 manor owners who were there with those from Black Moon Castle. Miss Christine, I heard that you became a business partner with Black Moon Castle a few months ago. Do you know them well? Christine was the most popular manor owner there. She was beautiful, and she had a business in Monty Town, so she knew most of those officials. It was also because she wore gold-tier armor. Those officials envied her. She laughed. Of course, I know them. They would not have been able to achieve their achievements without my help. I've sent many maids to Black Moon Castle to most of their higher-ups. Otherwise, why would they be willing to equip me with gold-tier armor? Christine held a wine glass in her hand. It was a banquet, but she did not wear a formal suit. Instead, she wore the holy light armor of God's blessing. It rustled with every move she made. It was obvious she wanted to show off. Morgan stood nearby. He stuck a piece of steak into his mouth with a fork. He looked at the few officials around him. He looked a little jealous. What an annoying woman. She should talk in a low voice during the banquet. That is the right etiquette for a noble. Doesn't she understand that? Does she even have a high-ranking position? It's apparent that she had stolen that armor. She didn't even make as much contribution to Black Moon Castle as I did. Mr. Morgan, may I know what kind of contribution you've made to Black Moon Castle? Morgan did not mumble that softly, so the other officials heard him, and they looked at him curiously. He cleared his throat and used a handkerchief to wipe his mouth elegantly. Well, if I tell you about my contribution to Black Moon Castle, you might be frightened. He continued to say, I provide all the wine at Black Moon Castle. Well, you all know that the most important thing in life is to eat. You'll only have the strength to work when you're full. Well, my wine is not ordinary. All guards in Black Moon Castle became gold-tier warriors after they drank my wine. Really? Then you are too amazing. An official complimented him. Another person said, "Can you give me a bottle of that wine as well? I am willing to spend 100 gold coins to buy it." Morgan laughed. "I want to sell it to you too, but it is only available at Black Moon Castle. If you want it, wait until I return to Black Moon Castle in a few days and ask young Master Watson for it." He was not weaker than Christine in long-term planning. When the officials around Christine heard that, they walked to his side. Christine and Morgan's gazes met. It caused sparks to fly. "Damn that Morgan, he's stealing my limelight." Christine gritted her teeth, her voice raised by an octave. "Listen to me, that's not all my contribution to the Black Moon Castle. I also hand-picked those magical beasts for Monty Town. Young Master Watson has about 4,000 silver-tier magical beasts and tens of thousands of bronze-tier magical beasts. I have about 500 silver-tier magical beasts in my manor, and each of them is stronger than the silver-tier magical beasts here. Miss Christine, it is as expected of you." The officials complimented her and returned to Christine's side. She turned toward Morgan with a smug look and rolled her eyes at him. Morgan was furious. He was not willing to be outdone, so he said, "You speak as if we are not the same. I have even more in my manor, 600 silver-tier magical beasts." Morgan could not help but feel a surge of anger. Not willing to be outdone, he retorted, "You speak as if we are not the same. I have left even more in my manor, a total of 600 silver-tier magical beasts. I don't have any bronze-tier magical beasts because I do not fancy them." The two of them were at an impasse. The officials were stunned when they heard that. They jumped back and forth between those two. It looked like they had sent the leftover silver-tier magical beasts to Monty Town. No wonder Black Moon Castle only wanted 10 gold coins for each of them. Even the leftover ones were that powerful. They could not imagine the strength of the other ordinary magical beasts in Black Moon Castle. Chapter 183. The Return of the Astrologer. Norton hid in the corner of the banquet hall as he listened to Morgan and Christine's argument. He put a piece of meat in his mouth. He looked envious. It was great. Morgan and Christine were the first to become business partners with Black Moon Castle. One was in the wine trade, and the other was in the business of flesh. They were much more powerful than him, someone with only milk produce. That was why Black Moon Castle valued them. He only had about 200 silver-tier magical beasts at his manor. It was enough to protect them from any invasion. Some officials also surrounded him. Even though there were not as many people around him as Morgan and Christine, there were still quite a number of them. "Lord Norton, I heard that you produce milk. It must be extraordinary milk that you supply to Black Moon Castle." At that moment, Black Moon Castle had become unfathomable to those officials. Even though they fawned over those manor owners then, they would not usually glance at them. "It's not as impressive as you think, it is very ordinary. Young Master Watson sympathizes with my hard work, so he's willing to buy from me." He knew his worth, unlike Morgan and Christine. Those officials did not surround him because he was outstanding but because he had benefited from Watson. However, the officials did not believe him. Just as they continued to question him, a cry of surprise came from the main seat in the banquet hall. It interrupted their thoughts. It was Geraint. "Young Master Zeke, what did you just say? You have a phoenix egg, and you are willing to sell it to Monty Town? Did I hear it correctly?" Geraint stared at Zeke in surprise. The phoenix was a legendary platinum-tier magical beast. It was as rare as the Dragon Clan. Compared to the Dragon Clan, which had a low fertility rate, the phoenix would lay eggs every day. Its eggs could awaken one's phoenix bloodline, and it could also bring one back from the dead. As a member of the Ptolemy family, Geraint's family had pentacolor fragrant chickens that contained the phoenix bloodline. Therefore, they knew a lot about those legendary magical beasts. He did not expect Black Moon Castle to have such a legendary magical beast's eggs. "Well, the egg is not from a real phoenix. It's from a hybrid phoenix. Black Moon Castle has a hybrid phoenix and a dragon," Zeke explained with a smile. He clapped his hands. Zenoa and Peter immediately went outside. A short while later, they returned with a huge box. There were 35 crystal-clear phoenix eggs that looked like rubies in the box. There was a faint flame on them, which turned into the shape of wings as if they would fly away. Everyone in the room looked at them the moment the phoenix eggs appeared. Their eyes had a bright glint in them. Bathed in the sacred flame, with wings that were ready to fly. Those were the characteristics of phoenix eggs. Those are real phoenix eggs. Geraint swallowed his saliva. His voice became hoarse from his shock. He was very surprised when he saw the phoenix eggs and heard what Zeke mentioned about the hybrid phoenix and dragon at Black Moon Castle. Where did they get those two precious magical beasts? Was Black Moon Castle related to the royal family? It was no wonder the astrologer had become Black Moon Castle's eighth son's teacher. It was probably not because of his talent. The astrologer had not left the Temple of the Stars for a long time. He would not tutor anyone even when several nobles offered him a high price for his service. Why did he take the initiative to take Watson as a disciple? Something fishy must have happened. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that that was the case. Black Moon Castle had become even more in his heart. Geraint was silent for a few seconds before he opened his mouth carefully. Young Master Zeke, how much are those phoenix eggs? He would buy it even if Zeke wanted more than 10,000 gold coins for one. That egg could save him even if his limbs were broken and his heart was pierced. That was equivalent to a second chance at life. The price of the hybrid phoenix eggs is 1,000 gold coins per egg, and it is non-negotiable. We have 35 of them for now. You're not allowed to resell them, Zeke said. Even though their hybrid phoenix could lay 100 eggs per day, and they might still have many at home, he had to give priority to his family members. On the other hand, an item would be more valuable if it was rare and scarce. 1,000 gold coins for one egg? I'll give you 40,000 gold coins. I'll take all of them. Geraint thought it was too cheap. He thought they would cost 10,000 gold coins for one, but he was prepared to spend a lot on them. However, it seemed like Black Moon Castle was still very generous with their offer. He did not even hesitate about it. During his tenure as the mayor, he had earned about 100,000 gold coins. It was more than enough to buy those phoenix eggs. Mayor Geraint, aren't you a little too greedy? You want to keep such a precious treasure for yourself? I'll offer 2,000 gold coins. Just give me one phoenix egg. Then I'll pay 3,000 gold coins. My son will start his cultivation soon. He'll stand out with this phoenix egg. The officials around them walked forward in anger. All of you, shut up. I'm the mayor. I should be the one to distribute these phoenix eggs. Why are you speaking nonsense? Are you trying to rebel? Geraint slapped the table and stood up abruptly. We need the eggs mainly to revive the dead. It's a waste to use it on one's strength. For example, the City Defense Forces director would not have died if we had the phoenix eggs. I suggest we store these eggs in my family's warehouse and use them as needed. I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. Kindness, yeah, right. His words caused a wave of boos from the officials. It would certainly be strange if they would ever see those phoenix eggs again. Geraint might even sell them at 5,000 or 10,000 gold coins for each one, and they would have to bear with it. It was a precious treasure. Why would they care if Geraint was the mayor or not? I don't care. I have to get a phoenix egg today. Those eggs belong to Black Moon Castle, not you, mayor. They will decide on who to sell them to. No one knew who said that, but all the officials looked at Zeke with eager eyes. They did not fight for the magical beasts because it would not have mattered who bought them. However, it was different with the phoenix eggs. It was consumable. It would be gone in a few bites. What should we do? Zeke tapped his cheek with his fingers with a deliberate troubled look on his face. We would like to sell you a phoenix egg each, but we currently only have 35 eggs. Some of you may not be able to get it. Why don't we bid for it? The one with the highest price will get it. I think that is fair. The officials looked at each other. They knew that Zeke had raised the price deliberately, but they did not care. It was expensive, but it was better than nothing. Furthermore, Black Moon Castle had given them a lot of benefits. They should not be greedy. I want the first phoenix egg. I'll bid 8,000 gold coins. I'll bid 4,000 gold coins for the second one. It's already a high price. Don't compete with me if you know what's good for you. Since Zeke had set the rules, Geraint had no choice but to follow them. He had to participate in the auction. I'll bid 6,000 gold coins. Your 4,000 gold coins bid is not high enough. I'm the mayor, so what? Can the mayor do whatever he wants? I'll bid 6,000 gold coins. If you can, then raise the price. If you don't, then don't buy it. Zeke smiled when he saw the scene. Go on, continue to quarrel. The more you fight, the better it is for us. We don't care about the profit that much, we just want to create some conflicts amongst you. It'll be easier to control Monty Town after winter ends. Zeke wondered if Watson would be surprised to learn that his brother had managed to control Monty Town in only a few months. I wonder if Watson would be surprised to know that his master had brought him so many benefits? The astrologer stood on the back of a giant rock golem as he fiddled with the 5 rings on his fingers. Those 5 rings were Sylvan's song of the Nibelung's rings. Sylvan had intended to give Watson only 2 rings, but the astrologer insisted on all the rights. When Sylvan finally gave in, he had said, "Give Watson these 5 rings first. I will give him the remaining 5 when he comes to Fairy Castle after the winter. He is so stingy with his own son. No wonder he is known as a stingy elf. It must have been because the border is so miserable every winter." There was a row of carriages behind the astrologer, led by Nightingale. 10 gold-tier warriors, who were also from the Shadow Guards, stood behind them. They guarded the weapons, armor, and other materials on the carriages as they put some rye bread into bags. Then they threw them randomly out of the carriages. There were refugees everywhere on the road, groups of people that included adults and children, and some even carried senior citizens on their backs. Those people were forced to flee because their houses and farmland had been destroyed by magical beasts when winter arrived. They were running toward Monty Town and some even further away. There were always refugees looking for a safe place during the winter. They would only start farming again at the start of spring. Some people were reluctant to leave because their ancestors were from the border. Some had businesses there and could not go. They had one common denominator: their lives were hard. "Thank you, thank you." The astrologer sighed when those refugees knelt on the ground to thank them before they wolfed down their food. He waved his hand gently and cast the platinum-tier earth elemental spell, Dreamland. The ground bloomed with flowers, and its fragrance replenished those refugees' stamina. He was the greatest mage in the kingdom, but there was something he could not do, and that was to interfere with the lives of others. The only thing he could do was to reduce the suffering of those within his sight. He could have used the teleportation spell to return to Black Moon Castle quickly, but he would rather take the carriage and spend some time on the road. Chapter 184. Who Can Save Everyone? Nightingale sat in the first carriage, her slender hand on her chin and the reins in the other, as she watched the scenery along the way. It had been 6 days since she left the Fairy Castle, and she was about to arrive at Black Moon Town. However, she was unhappy because she saw many refugees along the way, as well as magical beasts and corpses. She had seen a group of bronze-tier wolves charged into a manor and killed wantonly. She also saw some men dressed as mercenaries work together to deal with a silver-tier ice monstrous bear, but the magical beast crushed their heads instead. She had never seen a mother kill her child and threw the body out as bait to avoid those magical beasts. It was an environment where not only the magical beasts were killing humans, but humans were killing each other too. Every winter, the same thing happens. I wonder when it will end? It is different this year too. There are too many magical beasts, and they appear to be stronger. We usually only see silver-tier magical beasts when the season is ending, but we've seen a few of them already. I wonder what's going on. She had killed all the magical beasts they came across on their way to Black Moon Castle. Even the Shadow Guards and the astrologer did the same. There were at least tens of thousands of those magical beasts, but that was only a drop in the bucket of magical beasts in the misty forest. There were millions of tens of millions of magical beasts there. Nightingale's parents were killed by magical beasts 10 winters ago. Every time the season arrived, she would think of her parents. The faces in her memories were blurry, but she would never forget the hatred. Roar! The sky was dark and heavy with snow. On a snowy ground not far from the carriages, a few stray dog-shaped magical beasts bit into a corpse that had exposed white bones. They seemed to hear the sound of the wheels. A few wild dogs raised their heads, and blood flowed down their fangs. They noticed the powerful aura of Nightingale and the others, so they lowered their heads again. Those wild dogs did not have a strong aura. They were only iron-tier magical beasts and simple intelligence. The wild dogs hesitated, but when they felt that they were no match against Nightingale and the others, they remained at the sides of the road. However, many refugees ran away from the carriages. The adults covered their children's eyes while the rest of the refugees took out weapons such as daggers and hoes as they stared at the group of wild dogs vigilantly. Those dogs were only at the iron tier, so they did not have much fighting power. 3 or 4 strong adults could subdue them easily. The two sides were in a standoff. The wild dogs did not dare to act rashly. Just as the group of refugees was about to pass by the magical beasts, they heard a miserable cry. A middle-aged man's arm had been completely torn off. He fell onto the ground and hugged his arm as he wailed in pain. A goshawk with wings that spanned several meters wide fell from the sky and landed beside the man. It chewed on the bloodied arm, and its sharp eyes were filled with cruelty. "It's a bronze-tier magical beast, the wind-splitting eagle. Everyone, run!" someone shouted. The remaining refugees scattered like birds. Only a barefoot little girl in shabby clothes ran to the middle-aged man's side and hugged him as she cried bitterly. "Daddy, what happened to you? Daddy? Don't leave me behind. Mommy is already dead. I only have you, Daddy." After the wind-splitting eagle descended, a few of the wild dogs that were eating rotten meat immediately lowered their heads and howled as they trotted away. Meanwhile, the wind-splitting eagle scanned its surroundings before its glance landed on the middle-aged man and the little girl. It knew that they were the easier prey. The eagle spread its wing as a green storm enveloped its body. It charged toward the man and the little girl. Its opened claws were sharper than most blades. The little girl's face was filled with despair as she closed her eyes in fear. The eagle was about to crush their heads. Whoosh! At that moment, they heard a sound. A dark light flashed, and the wind-splitting eagle was torn into two. Nightingale held a dagger in her hand and stretched her right hand toward the girl who had opened her tearful eyes. She had yet to recover from the fear. "Are you okay?" "Thank you, sister." The little girl rubbed her eyes with her fists. Then she smiled at Nightingale. "I'm fine, but my father is injured. Lord Astrologer, please treat that man." Nightingale turned around and pleaded with the astrologer. Almost as soon as she finished speaking, the ground beside the man began to squirm and bright flowers bloomed. The released powder touched the man's shoulder and healed his injuries. His wounds closed and the blood stopped. As the wound healed, the middle-aged man stood up with a pale face. He repeatedly kowtowed toward Nightingale and thanked her. "Miss, I thank you enough." Nightingale waved her hand and handed the dagger to the little girl. "No need to thank me. All those magical beasts deserve to die. I just did what I should have done. This is my dagger, a silver-tier weapon. You can have it as a defensive tool." Nightingale's soft heart was touched. Perhaps she felt a similarity to the little girl. "Miss, you're already my benefactor for saving me. How can we still accept your things?" The middle-aged man refused, but finally, he could not resist Nightingale's intense gaze. He thanked her again before he took the dagger and left with his daughter. Before they left, the little girl reluctantly said goodbye to Nightingale. "Big sister, thank you for the dagger. With it, my father and I should be able to survive. My father is a pastry chef, and his rye bread is very delicious. When we come back, I'll ask my father to make it for you." Nightingale did not say anything. She just smiled and waved her hand, but she felt delighted. Even though she had given away her precious silver-tier weapon, she did not feel the slightest bit of heartache because she felt that she had saved 2 lives. At that moment, she heard a sigh from above her head. What a pity. Those 2 people won't be able to walk far before they die. Nightingale's body trembled. She raised her head in disbelief and realized it was the astrologer who had spoken. "Lord Astrologer, they have a weapon now. They don't need to increase their combat power. A silver-tier dagger is enough to cut bronze-tier or even some silver-gold magical beasts. Their chances of survival should be greatly increased. Why would they die? If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself." The astrologer did not say anything else. He rubbed his hands to trigger the starfall spell. It formed 24 glowing cards that connected to form a magic mirror. The image in the mirror was of a one-armed middle-aged man and a little girl who had just left. They brought the body of the wind-splitting eagle that Nightingale had killed back to the group of refugees and distributed the meat. However, the other refugees did not thank him. They did not ask how he killed the bronze-tier magical beast, but they conspired to kill him and steal his dagger. The last scene in the image was of the little girl squatting alone in front of her father's corpse and crying. Behind her, several dog-shaped magical beasts were approaching her. Nightingale's body trembled as she muttered, "How could that be?" Her face turned pale. "It's because of the dagger you gave them. They did not have the strength to wield it." It's never a good thing to have a precious treasure in your hands, as it might get you killed. As one might say, an innocent man will get himself killed, the astrologer explained to her. However, Nightingale could no longer listen to him. She turned around and began to walk in the direction the girl had left. She had caused the man's death, so she had to save the child. However, just as she took a step forward, a glowing barrier appeared in front of her and stopped her. "Hey, why are you so reckless?" The astrologer withdrew his right hand that he used to cast magic. That was not reality, but only something that might happen. They might not be dead, but they might die, right? Nightingale retorted stubbornly. Who in this world is not destined to die? Even if the two of them do not die this winter, they might die in other accidents. You may be able to protect them once, but can you protect them for the rest of their lives? The astrologer's voice gradually became serious. You want to protect them. What about the others? Should you leave them to die? Since you can't save everyone, then don't lend your help to specific people. Saving people selectively is not mercy, it is pride. The astrologer's words shocked Nightingale. After a moment of silence, she returned to the carriage. The carriages continued to move. Nightingale did not speak again on the way. She only talked when they were near Black Moon Town. Lord Astrologer, is there really no way to save everyone? Not even an elite like you have a way to do that? There is no way to save everyone in this world. Not even a god can do that, let alone me. After he comforted Nightingale, the astrologer looked into the distance. We are already near Black Moon Town. Don't let your imagination run wild. Before you think of saving others, you must first let your family and friends live a good life. My disciple, Watson, has done a good job on that. Before they left Fairy Castle, he heard that Nightingale and his disciple had a good relationship. That was why he had taught Nightingale some principles while they were on the way. If one wanted to be stronger, one would need to understand the true meaning of the world. There was no difference between the path of cultivation and the path of life. Nightingale thought about the astrologer's principles and muttered, "It's impossible to save everyone." She looked in the direction of Black Moon Town. When she saw that it did not matter, she was shocked. Hundreds of thousands of magical beasts crowded the front of Black Moon Castle. More than half of those were silver-tier magical beasts, and the lowest ones were bronze-tier magical beasts. That number alone could make one's heart tremble. Those magical beasts were too powerful. Each of those magical beasts could knock down Black Moon Castle's walls with a simple wave of its claws. Why were there so many magical beasts outside Black Moon Castle? Did those magical beasts invade the castle? Nightingale was a little confused, and then she was anxious about the situation. She was about to teleport to help them, but she realized that something was wrong. The hundreds of thousands of magical beasts in town did not attack anyone. Instead, they carried large and small ores, herbs, and fruits on their backs. They seemed to have moved out of the misty forest and were in a neat formation as they escorted the ragged refugees into Black Moon Town. Chapter 185. Only the hero, Watson. What's going on? Nightingale stared at Black Moon Castle not far away. She looked a little lost. She rubbed her eyes and realized that she was not wrong. Hundreds of thousands of magical beasts did carry something on their back, and there was a refugee in ragged clothes among every few magical beasts. She estimated that there were more than 10,000 refugees. Those magical beasts did not eat those people. Instead, they protected them. It was a miracle. At the Black Moon Town entrance, a few Black Moon Knights controlled a rock wall to move it. The wall was transformed from a giant lava golem. The Black Moon Knights made a few announcements. Anyone who encounters a disaster during the winter or whose life is threatened by magical beasts can come to Black Moon Town. Black Moon Town accepts all refugees and has prepared a free residence and food for all of you. Thank you, sirs. A middle-aged man on the bridge bowed to the Black Moon Knights. An old woman with gray hair and dressed in patched clothes stood behind him. She shed tears of excitement and lowered her head repeatedly. Thank you so much. A place to live and some food is enough for us. You are too generous. The generous one is Black Moon Town's owner, young Master Watson. If you wish to thank someone, you can thank him, one of the Black Moon Knights responded humbly. The refugees got more excited when they heard those words. Praise Black Moon Castle. Praise Master Watson. Then, they walked into the town. Why are there so many magical beasts and refugees outside Black Moon Castle? It was not only Nightingale, but the astrologer was also confused. Lord Astrologer, didn't you say that we should protect our family and friends before saving others? Why do I feel like Watson is doing the opposite? Perhaps. Well, there is no problem with my teaching. You have only seen the surface of things. Maybe Watson is saving those refugees to claim their property. In short, Watson is a brilliant child. He is not a person who will make a loss. Then, the astrologer's team arrived at the outskirts of Black Moon Town. Good heavens, these are walls made up of giant lava golems. There must be at least hundreds of them. Even a silver tier elite would think twice about attacking the wall. Well, Watson did build a building that can float in the sky. I don't even dare to have such a bold idea. What a grand gesture. As the astrologer sighed, a huge shadow streaked across his head and left a deep black mark on the ground. He looked up. It was not only the astrologer, but the shadow guards from Fairy Castle also got out of the carriages, one after another. They divided the essential materials into boxes and took them down. Nightingale was the last to get out of the carriage. She stared at the entirely different Black Moon Town. Her mouth was slightly ajar. When she left, Black Moon Castle was only an ordinary castle that covered several kilometers in radius. It looked like the castle had become a town, but it was not a typical town at all. As she observed the situation, she heard a beast roar from the direction of the town. A 100-meter-long gigantic dragon covered in platinum scales soared toward the sky. Its wings stirred up a storm as its cold vertical eyes looked downward at the earth. A smaller magical beast was beside it. Its body was ablaze, and its feathers were colored like a phoenix. It danced in the air. The other magical beasts that were used as transport trembled when they saw the two new magical beasts. They moved even faster. The refugees who had just arrived in town also looked up toward the sky. They were speechless. They had never seen such a powerful magical beast in their entire lives, let alone the winter. Fortunately, those two magical beasts were raised by Black Moon Castle. Nightingale, is that the same Black Moon Castle that you have been longing for? It is unique, indeed. The Border Count sent us here to cast magic on the castle and let it float in the sky, and it looks like it is not in vain. Even the Border Count does not dare to do that. But it's a good idea. There are too few flying elemental magical beasts in the entire Misty Forest. Once we move the castle into the sky, we won't be afraid of most magical beasts' attacks. We'll have to report that to the Border Count when we get back. A group of men, who were also the shadow guards, followed Nightingale and looked around the town. They nodded from time to time and exclaimed like country bumpkins. Nightingale did not feel embarrassed because she was the same when she was there for the first time. The astrologer rode a giant rock golem, which was particularly eye-catching when they arrived at the outskirts of Black Moon Town. The Black Moon Knights also noticed them. The Black Moon Knight's leader touched his right hand and turned into a bolt of lightning, and he immediately appeared 100 meters away from the astrologer. I am Gorman. Welcome home, Lord Astrologer. The Black Moon Knight knelt on one knee. His smooth purple hair was wrapped with electric light. The shadow guards, the astrologer, and even Nightingale narrowed their eyes when they saw it. They all thought that the man had moved too quickly. Can you teleport 500 meters at one time? Nightingale asked the people around her in a low voice. Her companions shook their heads to show that they could not. Nightingale pursed her lips. She could not do it either. The last guard who came to Black Moon Castle was only a silver tier elite. She did not expect to see a gold tier guard. They were the same level as her. Of course, Nightingale was ashamed of her inferior speed. If it were a face-to-face fight, she was confident that she could defeat Gorman. Gorman, it seems that you have completely understood the law of lightning. Your talent is outstanding. Right now, you can use a gold tier mage card to unleash your combat aura comparable to the peak of a gold tier elite. Your strength is among the best amongst the Black Moon Knights. The astrologer stroked his beard. He looked relieved. That guard would not have achieved that without his guidance. Nightingale and the others also heaved a sigh of relief when they heard that. Gorman was the best amongst the Black Moon Knights. No wonder he had such strength. However, no, it's because of your teaching, Lord Astrologer, Gorman replied humbly. And I am only ranked middle amongst the Black Moon Knights. Several other people are more powerful than me. Really? Nightingale and the shadow guards looked at each other in dismay. They saw the disbelief in each other's eyes as if they were verifying Gorman's words. Two figures flew from the Black Moon Town entrance. Well, to be precise, they were two streaks of light. One looked like a green storm that blew the snowflakes into chaos. The other was a meandering river that passed through the snowflakes and left a path made of ice in the air. The two streaks of light only revealed themselves when they were close. They were List and Allen. They cupped their fists toward the astrologer at the same time. "Greetings, Lord Astrologer." After they achieved the gold tier, the two men's behavior had changed. They were less sharp and more mysterious. "Elemental body? You guys have grasped the basics of the elemental body?" The astrologer looked at the two of them. He stopped stroking his beard. He almost pulled off a few strands of his beard. The elemental body was an ability that warriors could master after they entered the platinum tier. Compared to combat aura wings and teleportation, the elemental body was a much more powerful skill. Its effect was to turn part of their bodies into elements so that they could penetrate tangible objects. Thus, the effect was similar to magic, and it was more direct than magic. Only some gold tier warriors with outstanding talent had the chance to use elemental bodies at that level. They realized that List and Allen would be able to reach the platinum tier if they had enough time. The astrologer could no longer treat them as mere guards but as future elites. "Lord Astrologer, young Master Watson has been waiting for you. Please follow me." List made a gesture of invitation and turned to look at Nightingale with an elegant expression. "And Miss Nightingale, it's been a long time. Please follow me too." "Okay." Nightingale nodded in response to List's invitation. She felt a little troubled. She knew about the elemental body even though she had yet to master it. It seemed like List and Allen had already surpassed her in terms of strength. She did not know what medicine Watson had given them to increase their strength so quickly. If she had known earlier, she would have stayed in Black Moon Castle for a longer period. If she could upgrade her silver tier medicine to gold tier, perhaps she could break through to platinum tier? As she muttered in her heart, Nightingale suddenly smelled a fragrance. She looked up and saw a new group of refugees had arrived in Black Moon Town. They sat opposite each other around a few large pots. Something was cooking in the pots. There were pieces of meat that looked like magical beast meat, and there was a ginseng-like side dish next to it. The fragrance assailed her nostrils. Watson stood in front of the large pot and explained what he had made to the refugees in detail. "The meat in this pot is silver tier hybrid icefield wolf meat. It can help you to resist the cold and strengthen your body. The ginseng is also silver tier. After you eat them, I will take you to rest. The houses are all giant rock golems that I summoned. All of that is free. Of course, if you are not used to living here, then you can choose to leave. For those who choose to leave, I will give them a set of silver tier armor. It is also free." Watson's voice was not loud, but it resounded throughout the entire place. All the refugees looked excited. No one chose to leave. Instead, they thanked Watson. Some of them were so moved by Watson's offering that they kowtowed to the young boy. They will get a set of silver tier armor and equipment if they leave? Is Watson crazy? The astrologer widened his eyes and looked at the large boxes that the shadow guards carried with them. He had brought more than 1,000 silver tier armor for Watson. He had wanted that to be a surprise for him. However, when Watson asked for tens of thousands of pieces of equipment, was he not afraid that those refugees would choose to leave? Even if they did not leave, the refugees were eating too well, silver tier magical beast meat mixed with medicinal herbs. The astrologer also saw a few maids giving the refugees some delicately packaged red wine. The meal must have cost at least a few thousand gold coins. The astrologer thought that those tens of thousands of refugees ate better than he did in Fairy Castle for the past few days. He felt that life was a little unfair. Then, he heard Nightingale's faint voice. "Lord Astrologer, the situation is different from what you expected, indeed. Watson has to protect his family and also everyone else in sight. No one in that world could save everyone." That was the truth, or, at least, the astrologer's truth. However, many of them still did it even though they knew it was impossible. Nightingale thought those people should be called heroes. She looked at Watson with a gentle gaze. She admired and envied them. Watson had given such good food to the refugees. One could only imagine the great food that the guards would have in their residences. No wonder the guards had managed to advance by leaps and bounds as if they were on steroids. Nightingale bit her lips in envy. It seemed that the pentacolor fragrant chicken eggs that Watson had given her were not the best item there. She decided to stay in Black Moon Castle for a while to see if Watson had any other benefits for her. If she could not become a platinum tier elite before the end of winter, she would stay there forever. Chapter 186. The Song of the Nibelungs. Ahem, I'll talk to Watson later. The astrologer was a little embarrassed by Nightingale's skepticism. Watson, in his opinion, was a bright young man. He expected Watson would take advantage of the winter to raise the price of supplies and earn a fortune, but he did not anticipate Watson to help the refugees for free. It was good to be kind in that world, but one had to act within one's abilities. More than 1 million people lived along the border, including those who made it through the winter. The remaining refugees were at least hundreds of thousands. Watson had no with that because the castle only housed tens of thousands of immigrants. The situation would be different if that number were multiplied by 10. My disciple is usually quite smart, but why is he so stupid now? Does he believe he can support that many people with the wealth of Black Moon Castle? The astrologer muttered to himself as he walked up to Watson, who was giving a speech in front of the refugees. He continued to say to himself, "No, I have to persuade him." "Master, you're back." Watson turned his head as he heard footsteps and smiled sweetly at the astrologer. Then he pointed at the astrologer and said to the refugees in front of him, "This is my master, the well-known astrologer from the Holy Dragon Kingdom's capital. Black Moon Castle will be completely protected under his protection. If anyone wishes to leave, I may request my master to send you to other safe locations for free. Aside from that, one moment," the astrologer interrupted him with a frown. He heard those refugees discussed amongst themselves. "That is the legendary astrologer. He looks more intelligent than I imagined. The astrologer is a big shot in the capital. How would we dare to let him escort us?" The astrologer's expression eased a little. Even the refugees knew that he was of noble status and could not be compelled to act. If he did not stop Watson, he would probably arrange many more troublesome tasks for him. "What's wrong, master? I haven't finished my words yet." "Don't worry, the jobs I've arranged for you are all small favors." "Master, you won't refuse these small requests, right?" Watson blinked, and his eyes flickered. The astrologer's frown softened. He realized Watson was acting sweet on purpose. He clapped his hands and said, "I have something important to tell you later. It's related to the refugees. Before that, I'll first give you the things I brought from Fairy Castle." Nightingale and a few shadow guards from Fairy Castle immediately moved the treasure chest toward Watson and opened it. There were many shiny armor and weapons in it. The first chest had 100 items, all of which were gold-tier weapons. The light made it hard for people to open their eyes. The next chest had 1,000 silver-tier equipment, and in the last chest, there were bottles of various potions. No one knew the purpose of those potions. The shadow guards swallowed their saliva when they saw those items. As shadow guards, they did not have any complete gold-tier equipment on them, let alone the gold-tier medicine in the last few boxes. They were life-saving items, so they were even more precious. After the astrologer revealed the items, he stroked his beard and waited for Watson's exclamations and praises. He had worked hard to bring Watson so many good things, so the young boy would definitely be very grateful to him. It was an excellent opportunity for him to use those items to persuade Watson about how tough it was to gather supplies and feed the immigrants. However, "Are those the only items you brought back, master?" Watson rummaged through the crates, his lips twisted in displeasure. "Only? What do you mean, Watson? Those items are worth more than 200,000 gold coins. Are those not enough to satisfy you?" The astrologer's hand stopped, and his expression froze. "I can't say that I am not content. I can only say I am generally satisfied. Now that all Black Moon Castle guards have been upgraded to gold tier, silver tier equipment is no longer useful to them. They don't even use them as tools for training." Watson sighed. "Only the 100 gold tier weapons and armor are adequate. However, the quality is not up to my expectations." Watson realized he had gone too far when he noticed the astrologer seemed aggrieved, so he quickly changed his words. "Of course, these things are from Fairy Castle. It has nothing to do with you, master. If you want to blame someone, blame Fairy Castle's owner for being too stingy." "That's right. Sylvan gave me too few things, and I'm his teacher." Since Watson had graciously prepared an excuse for him and that the astrologer had taken the correct course, it was better for Watson to blame Sylvan than him. At the same time, he grumbled quietly in his heart. Watson's appetite had grown stronger after he had not seen his master for a few days. He was no longer interested in silver-tier equipment. He was not impressed with gold-tier items. Fortunately, before he left, he had asked Sylvan for the 5 Song of the Nibelung's rings. Otherwise, he would lose face in front of his disciple. With that in mind, he took out the rings he had prepared and handed them to Watson. Those were only casual gifts. The most important ones are these 5 platinum-tier rings. It was not easy for me to get them from Sylvan. Praise me quickly, the astrologer murmured as he stroked his beard again. Watson was not interested in silver or gold-tier equipment, but platinum-tier equipment should be able to move his heart. However, Watson's following words caused him to freeze once again. Master, why did you give me defective platinum-tier equipment? Did you split them and not give me the complete one? I was a little excited as I thought you were going to give me 5 platinum-tier equipment. But it looks like these 5 rings are only half of a complete set of equipment. Isn't it a little stingy to split a gift into numerous parts and give it away? Platinum Tier Tool. Song of Nibelungenlied, 5 rings. Effect. Can defend against platinum tier attacks. It is said that that ring is a precious treasure left behind by a lost civilization. A complete set includes 10 rings and can trigger a special skill called the Symphony of Fate. However, if the rings are incomplete, you will not be able to use that skill. Instead, each ring will have an independent skill. Additional effects. Song of Courage increases all attributes' attack power by 500% and removes pain or fatigue during combat. Song of Wisdom increases thinking power by 500%. Song of Glory increases charm, leadership, and eloquence by 500%. Song of Fortitude increases defense by 500%. Song of Freedom increases speed by 500%. Additional skills. Alchemy Fusion. Rings are made from high-end alchemy. Each additional ring that you master will increase all of the above effects by 100%. Symphony of Fate. All rings combined will allow you to make a wish. The wish will follow the principle of equivalent exchange and can only be used once a day. Since you do not have all of the rings, you cannot use them at the moment. Watson sighed as he read the information on the rings. One might say that he had 2 platinum-tier items. He was very familiar with that level of equipment. He knew that the Nibelungenlied ring's ability could be increased, and its effect was mediocre. The ring's true power was in its Symphony of Fate skill. In the end, he could not use that ability. The border count is too stingy. He knew that those rings are not powerful when separated, yet he still gave them to me. It's obvious that he wants to give them a gift, but he's not willing to do that. Watson fiddled with the 5 rings in his hand. Those rings represented 5 virtues: courage, wisdom, glory, perseverance, and freedom. They could be used separately. For example, if he gave them to 5 people, they could increase their speed, strength, and defense. Those rings could help those who were fast but weak in attack, strong in attack but weak in defense. It could complement their shortcomings. But that won't do much. Why don't I fuse these rings and see if I can improve their attributes? Since the border count was so stingy, he would not stand on ceremony. With that thought in mind, Watson activated the system fusion on the 5 rings in his hand. The 5 rings collided in a dazzling light and turned into a golden, simple ring with an Ouroboros engraved on it. The shape was like an upside-down number 8, and it was very mysterious. Chapter 187. I make this wish with 10 years of my master's life. Congratulations, master, for a successful fusion. Platinum tier item. The Nibelung ring, minor flaw. Effect. Can resist platinum tier attacks. The ring can trigger the Symphony of Fate skill. Additional effects. Song of Courage, Song of Wisdom, Song of Glory, Song of Determination, Song of Freedom. Additional skills. Alchemy Fusion, Symphony of Fate. Obtain the ability to make a wish, but you must pay double the price to get something. It can only be activated once a day. Watson's gaze was drawn to the Ouroboros on the ring, which he held in his hand. In that world, the Ouroboros symbolized fate, reincarnation, and infinity. The Song of the Nibelungs, like the Ouroboros, has a distinct meaning in that universe. Watson stroked his chin. He had looked through the books on the shelves to learn magic when he had just transmigrated to that world. One of the books, The Legend of the Dragon Slayer, had left a deep impression on him. A long, long time ago, the world was not what it was then. It was much larger than anyone had anticipated. The gods still dwelt on the land, and the Rhine, a golden river, meandered through the entire planet. The golden river was thought to be the incarnation of a particular source of magic. The gold in the river was the world's most valuable treasure. A weapon formed out of Rhine gold could pierce a dragon's neck or even a god's chest. One day, an evil dwarf stole a chunk of gold from the river and made it into 10 rings. He tried to dominate the world but was killed by a god who discovered him in time. Before he died, the dwarf threw the rings into the river, and he left a vicious curse on it. The person with the rings would gain unparalleled power. As a price, he would lose his beloved forever. Later, a royal noble named Siegfried found the ring and helped the country resist their enemy's invasion. He also killed the evil dragon that harmed the country, and he was known as the Dragon Slayer. Then, he fell in love with the young and beautiful princess named Brunhilde. Watson remembered that story so clearly because his 6th sister, Margaret, who had just gotten out of a bad state of mind at home, had read the story to him. Margaret wanted to become a novelist because she had read that book. She wanted to create a dragon-slaying chapter that was even more exciting than that story. "Master, you said that those rings came from the Border Count." "Well, the Border Count lost his favorite sister 10 years ago, and these are the Nibelung rings." "Does he have anything to do with that legendary story?" Watson thought for a moment, then shook his head and smiled self-deprecatingly. "How is that possible?" He focused his attention on the ring in his hand instead. After all, it was a 5-in-1 ring, so it had half the power of the complete set of the Song of the Nibelung's rings. He decided to try the Symphony of Fate ability. "Ring, I want to make a wish. Give me another 100 wishes." "Sorry, that wish cannot be fulfilled." "All right, it looks like cheating won't work. In that case, ring, I want to make a wish. I'm willing to exchange 2 silver coins for a piece of sweet cake." The medium to activate the Symphony of Fate ability was to twist the ring and say the line, "I want to make a wish." Then, he would need to announce the wish that he wanted to obtain in exchange for something of his. However, if that item did not belong to him, he would need to get permission from the owner first. As the ring processed his wish, it emitted a bright light. The ring emitted a bright light as it processed his wish. An illusory shadow appeared on the ring before it gradually turned into a palm-sized, 3-layered cake wrapped in cream and cocoa. It had a fragrant and sweet smell. One's appetite would soar when one looked at it. At the same time, a voice echoed in Watson's mind. "The host has obtained a piece of cake and lost 2 silver coins. The number of wishes today has been used up. Looks like I made a wish successfully. This ring is quite powerful." Watson grabbed the cake and stuffed it into his mouth. The rich, sweet cream filled his senses. It was no different from a real cake, from the texture to the feeling of being full. He touched his pocket. He was missing 2 silver coins. Turning silver coins into food. Well, this is quite different from the magic I know. The essence of magic was bound to the laws of the world. For example, fire magic could melt a stone into the liquid, but it could not turn a stone into gold or anything else. However, the Nibelung ring was different. It could change the rules. Watson could even make a wish to turn his feces into food, which was also edible. When food is scarce during the winter, money won't be as important. This ring is more useful than I thought. Watson's eyes twitched. He had taken in a significant number of refugees and was still concerned about their food, clothing, and shelter. Even though he had a fusion system capable of producing materials, it would also consume raw resources. It was also more difficult to go out and get them. Things were different since he had the ring. If he desired something, he might make a wish and have it granted. However, he would have to spend twice as much each time, and he could only make 1 wish per day. Those 2 constraints were a little too severe, but he had already devised a solution. Watson smiled at the astrologer as he turned around. "Thank you, Master. I appreciate the gift you gave me." "Walter, that's not what you said just now." As usual, when the astrologer noticed Watson had secured the item, he conveniently fused it and obtained the Nibelung ring's hidden ability. He did not think anything of it. Instead, he was perplexed by Watson's words. After a few days of acquaintance, he was more familiar with Watson. He knew that his disciple would only show such an expression when he wanted to con others. Master, I need a small favor from you, it's for some experiments. What favor? The astrologer had a bad feeling. He heard Watson say in a coquettish tone, Master, promise me, and I'll tell you. Don't worry. That favor will not affect you in any way. No, tell me first. The astrologer did not care that Nightingale and the others were beside him, and there was a large group of refugees. Watson's attitude meant that he wanted his master to do something dangerous. He did not dare to risk his own life. Well, I want to test the effect of the newly fused Niblinger ring. Master, you know that ring requires resources to make a wish. I don't have many things on me. I would like you to make that wish on my behalf. That's it? The astrologer sighed in relief. That's easy. I agree. He had thousands of pieces of silver and gold tier equipment beside them, and those were worth more than 200,000 gold coins. No matter what Watson's wish was, even if he wanted to build another Black Moon castle, those resources would be enough for that. Since the astrologer had agreed, Watson stretched his right hand outward. Green branches floated out of his palm and absorbed the starlight in the sky. They gradually broke and turned into 24 gold cards with different gods and other illustrations carved on them. His face was pale, and his skin was damp with sweat. That was because he had made 24 cards simultaneously. Then, he pointed at the ring and the cards in his hand at the same time. System fusion, activate. Before that, he needed at least 2 materials to fuse a weapon, but after he had learned to make the astrologer tarot cards, he could use the world tree branches to make those cards that were equivalent to gold tier weapons. It meant that he could still fuse weapons without extra materials. That was why he looked down on the equipment that the astrologer brought for him. He had created 24 gold tier cards casually. Although it was a little tiring, he could do that once a day. In other words, he could make 24 gold tier equipment every day, so mere silver tier equipment was nothing to him. Swoosh! With a soft sound, 24 streams of light covered the Niblinger ring and turned it into a ring that flowed with colorful lights. It covered Watson's finger and wiggled gently. It did not look like an ice-cold ring but more like a living creature. Congratulations, Master, for a successful fusion. You have obtained a peak platinum tier item, the Wish for the World Ring. With the original ability retained, you can increase the number of wishes that you can make to 2. Each wish will only cost half the price of the wish itself. After it fused with the 24 cards, the Niblinger ring was upgraded to peak platinum tier, and it had also become an independent item. It no longer relied on the remaining 5 rings. What was that? Nightingale stood at the side. She was dumbfounded. She had been excited to see Watson, as she had not seen him for a long time. However, when she saw Watson's consecution fusions, she stood frozen to her spot. Her body shuddered when she saw the power that Watson emitted as he created the astrology tarot cards. It was as if he was not human. When she had left Black Moon Castle, Watson was not her match, but it looked like he had surpassed her in a short amount of time. She heard that the astrologer had become Watson's teacher. Did the astrologer teach him well, or was it because Watson was too talented? While Nightingale pondered that, she heard Watson, who had successfully fused the ring, shouted excitedly as he raised his right hand. Master, I'm going to make a wish. Are you okay with it? What problem would I have? Hurry up and make a wish. The astrologer used his feet to push the boxes on the ground toward Watson's direction, indicating that he should start. Watson nodded at the astrologer as he began to chant resolutely. Ring, I want to make a wish. I'm willing to exchange 10 years of my master's life for the health and happiness of Black Moon Town's residents. Nightingale and the shadow guards were stunned. The astrologer also reacted. He almost fell to the ground in anger. Brat, what kind of wish is that? Just make a wish in exchange for the armor and weapons on the ground. How can you waste my life like that? Do you think your master will not die fast enough? Chapter 188. No more pretense. The astrologer was furious. He had signaled for Watson to utilize the armor and weaponry he had taken with him, and Watson agreed with a nod. He had agreed. Master, don't be angry. Even though that equipment is not valuable, it's a pity to waste it. You are different, Master. Didn't you drink from the spring of life in the forest of eternity, which meant that you'd never die? Your lifespan is meaningless to you. Watson looked apologetic as he consoled the enraged astrologer. Suddenly, the ring's notification echoed in his ear. The host's wish cannot be fulfilled because it does not match the price paid. To fulfill the wish, you will need to spend at least another 100 years of your lifespan. The 10-year lifespan of a platinum tier elite cannot be exchanged for the safety of tens of thousands of ordinary people. To think that I only need to pay half the price because I fused the wish for the world ring. That wish would have taken at least 200 years of the astrologer's life if it had not been for the wish for the world ring that Watson had fused, which had a stronger effect than the original Nibelung ring. Of course, it was possible that the astrologer would live indefinitely. That is why the assessment of his lifespan was so cheap. With that thought in mind, Watson said decisively, "I'm willing to pay with 100 years of my master's life." The host's wish is successful. Everyone in Black Moon Town, including the host, has improved physical fitness and abnormal resistance attributes. Only one wish remains for today. Along with the voice, an unseen wave spread across Black Moon Town, beginning with the ring on Watson's finger. It spread like a wave in all directions before it disappeared. Everyone hit by that wave had changed in some way. A person whose legs were injured during the escape stood up from the ground, surprised, and exclaimed, "I can feel my legs." A few skinny, hungry children sat nearby. They had been staring at the big pots of food in front of them and subconsciously licked their lips. At that moment, the muscles on their bodies suddenly inflated, and they patted their stomachs in surprise. They did not feel hungry anymore. Did young Master Watson do that? Young Master Watson is too kind. Not only did he give us food, but he also used magic to improve our physical fitness. Everyone was happy. The only one unhappy was probably the astrologer. At that moment, the astrologer touched the wrinkles on his face. They seemed to have become deeper. Then, a few strands of snow-white hair fell from the top of his head. He looked sorrowful. "It's over. I've become older." He had drunk from the spring of life, and he would never die of old age. However, it did not mean that he would not grow old. "It's all right, Master. Regardless of whether you are old or young, you are still handsome in my heart. How about that? The wish for the world ring might have a third wish, and I can wish for you to be 100 years younger," Watson said flatteringly as he walked toward the astrologer. "Little brat, get lost." The astrologer was furious when he saw Watson. Of course, he was also shocked. He was the one who had given the Song of the Nibelung's rings to Sylvan. He knew what attributes the ring had, and other than the fact that it could increase one's combat aura tenfold, the ring's strongest technique was the Symphony of Fate. It could fulfill one wish every day, and any wish could be fulfilled. That was why the Song of the Nibelung's rings were famous amongst other platinum tier tools, and that was the reason the border count was reluctant to give all of them to Watson. However, it seemed like Watson had used some kind of method to modify the ring and obtain a stronger ability. "Watson, let me see the ring in your hand." The astrologer reached his hand outward, and Watson handed the ring to him. The astrologer glanced at it. He was shocked. He had platinum tier strength and profound knowledge, so he knew that the ring was several times stronger than before that. It had reached the peak of the platinum tier. The ring had also become a new tool. I wonder if Sylvan will cry when he finds out about this. That ring did not match the 5 rings in Sylvan's hand, so it could not be reassembled. In other words, the 5 rings in Sylvan's hand had become trash because he was unwilling to give all of them to Watson. The astrologer had lost some insignificant years in his lifespan, but Sylvan had lost a whole set of platinum tier tools. The astrologer felt a little more at ease and returned the ring to Watson. He said, "Brat, you have to keep that ring well. It's best if you don't show it to anyone else. Also, in the future, you are not allowed to use your wish without speaking to me." Watson had the World Tree's Shadow and the Wish for the World Ring. Both were peak platinum tier tools. The World Tree's Shadow was fine on its own. It could be hidden on his body and not be discovered. However, the Wish for the World Ring was different. Watson's strength was not at the peak tier yet, and those precious tools might attract unwanted attention. "Yes, Master, I understand." Watson stuck out his tongue. He looked indifferent, but he remembered the astrologer's words. His right hand twitched, and a branch of the World Tree wriggled outward and wrapped around the ring. Then, it returned to his body. "Hi, Watson. Long time no see. Do you still remember me?" While he did that, Nightingale walked out from the group of shadow guards and greeted him. She looked a little nervous. Since Watson was the astrologer's disciple, he was the border count's junior. She had to respect him because of his seniority. Furthermore, she was shocked when she saw Watson make a platinum-tier tool. Initially, she had wanted to ask Watson for benefits to make her stronger, but that thought had disappeared entirely. Miss Nightingale? Of course, I remember you. Watson smiled sweetly at Nightingale, which made her slightly relieved. Lord Sylvan sent me to Black Moon Castle. I'm in charge of transporting goods and helping Black Moon Castle through the winter. But now it seems like Black Moon Castle doesn't need my help. You don't have to say that. Miss Nightingale, you are a gold-tier elite. You can help Black Moon Castle in many ways. For example, you can help clean Black Moon Castle and the nearby manors. When you're free, you can go to the kitchen to cook some food or listen to the refugees' requests. Nightingale pouted her lips. She was a little displeased. It looked like warriors had been reduced to cleaning workers in Black Moon Town. Perhaps Watson despised her because she was weak. He did not treat her like a real gold-tier warrior. Nightingale did not reveal her thoughts. She asked, Watson, why did you gather so many refugees? And why are there so many magical beasts outside the town? It seems that half of the magical beasts in the misty forest are here. It's very simple. I can't bear to see them suffer. As for the magical beasts outside the town, they came by themselves. I had no way of capturing them. Watson's eyes flickered as he scratched his cheek with his right hand. Watson, is that really the case? Don't lie to me. Nightingale looked skeptical. She stared at Watson with burning eyes. She did not believe Watson when he said that he could not bear to see the refugees suffer. As for the magical beasts, it did not sound plausible that they went there on their own. All right, I won't pretend anymore. I'll lay my cards on the table. Watson could not bear the aggression in Nightingale's eyes. He sighed and spread his hands. I gathered those refugees to explore the misty forest, including the magical beasts outside the town. Otherwise, I would have fused them a long time ago. Explore the misty forest? Now? Watson nodded at Nightingale's confusion. The light in his eyes became more intense. Yes, now is the best time. The magical beasts have all left the misty forest. Isn't it the best time to go in and explore? Actually, I'm not the one who suggested that idea, but a man called Sven. If you want to know more about the details, I'll ask him to come by and talk to you later. Chapter 189. Heading to the misty forest. It is as expected of young master's soup. It tastes delicious. Sven sat cross-legged on the snowy ground as he held a bowl of steaming hot soup in his hand. He sniffed the soup and tilted the bowl. He took a big gulp and exhaled a cloud of hot air. Many others were like him. Tens of thousands of refugees drank the hot soup and chatted with each other around the soup cauldron. Many also held a bottle of wine in their hands. They drank until their faces were red. They held hands and danced as if it was not winter yet. It was a day that was worth a celebration. Sven's gaze was gentle. His thoughts drifted to an unknown place. Last winter, he had led his shabby bandit gang brothers in many robberies when the magical beasts raged. He saw only scenes of devastation and bloodied corpses. However, that year, he only saw happy people and their resolute faces despite their sufferings. That thought made him emotional. Sven, that soup was made by the maids, the former demoness bandit gang leaders. I didn't make them. In response to Sven's compliment, Watson, who was nearby, turned back and replied to him. Ahem. Sven paused, and he nearly choked. Well, the soup is delicious, but as I drank more of it, I realized it was quite mediocre. As expected, it is not better than young Master Watson's cooking. Although I did not make the soup, I did prepare the ingredients. That is what I said. Although the soup isn't perfect and appears to be missing something, the magical beast meat and ginseng in it are delicious. I can't stop eating it. As expected, the problem is that the ingredients are too good. I prepared the ingredients, but I did not fuse them. Alan and List got them near the misty forest. Ah, I see. When I mentioned that the magical beast meat and ginseng were delicious, I was mistaken. The meat has a distinct fishy odor. All right, Sven, I did not ask you for jokes. Watson could not keep it to himself much longer and interrupted Sven. Sven had congratulated him when he learned Watson had something to do with the pot of soup. It was obvious that he was trying to flatter him. List and Alan, who were also beside him, looked at Sven with unkind eyes. If it were not for the young master, the two of them would have already left. Nightingale had inquired about Black Moon Castle accepting refugees and a large number of magical beasts. Watson wanted to invite Nightingale to join him in exploring the Misty Forest, so he requested List and Alan to invite Sven as well. Sven was only a figurehead in Black Moon Castle and the leader of the ruined bandit gang. Under Watson's instructions, he openly searched for his team members. Unfortunately, because hundreds of bandit gangs, large and small, were destroyed in the Misty Forest, the remaining gangs either fled to other parts of the border or hid in the mountains, not daring to come out. That led to the winter that year. The bandits almost always attacked the nearby manors. That did not, however, imply that fewer individuals had perished that year. On the contrary, because the magical beasts that emerged from the Misty Forest that year were particularly formidable, there was no shortage of silver-tier magical beasts among them, resulting in the massacre of some small manors. One of the reasons for going to the Misty Forest was to find out why the magical beasts were stronger than the previous years and if anything had happened in the Misty Forest. Sven finished the hot soup in 2 or 3 gulps. He rubbed his hands and asked, "May I know why you've invited me here, young master? Tell us about your plan to go to the Misty Forest." Sven looked around, nodded, and continued to describe his idea. "Then I will speak casually. The Misty Forest has countless ruins, many of which were left behind by lost civilizations. I know a few, but they are all attended by formidable guards." He was a member of Black Moon Castle. Unlike the Black Moon Knights, he was still stuck at the silver tier because Watson did not give him any sun or moon gems that could upgrade him to the gold tier. That was the same for the former demoness bandit gang leaders. If he wanted to gain more benefits, he had to contribute to Black Moon Castle. Sven drew his walking stick from his waist as he spoke. It was a wooden staff. It had 7 inlaid positions, but there were no gemstones. The staff exuded a silver tier aura. "My staff is called the Undead Calamity. It can control the movements of the undead and the dead. This was found in a ruin, and it was an underground palace. I don't know how many floors there were, but I'm sure there are more precious treasures down there," Sven said confidently. "As you may have heard, I was planning to leave with the magical beasts after preparing food for the refugees. I was not expecting young Master and Miss Nightingale to return at that moment. In that case, you can come with us." Watson smiled. He had been coveting the treasures in the Misty Forest for a long time. Those items from the ancient lost civilizations were extremely powerful, and they might be able to fuse with platinum-tier tools. When he imagined himself acquiring a large number of tools and fusing them into platinum-tier tools for his family members and subordinates, he could not help but get excited. They could get gold-tier strength and platinum-tier tools. If everyone in Black Moon Castle had such standards, his goal to stand at the top of the kingdom would no longer be a dream. "I understand why you want to go to the Misty Forest, Watson, but you have not explained why you want to take in so many refugees. Was that also proposed by that man, Sven?" Nightingale nodded. She was not quite sure what had happened. She shook her head again. She was not an exceptionally bright individual. "Well," Watson paused. He had additional reasons for accepting those refugees. However, he did not want to tell Nightingale at that moment. "Let me explain that," Sven continued to say. "That was not my idea, it was young Master's idea. He might be young, but he is kind, and I admire him." Even though he said so, he knew that Watson did not do that because he was kind. He only wanted to gain more fame. He used to be a noble who was skilled at manipulating people's emotions, so he understood it when he saw the significance of Watson's actions. He had turned down the refugees who came to seek safety because he was tight with money. That was the fool's way. The wise strategy was to provide favors, acquire their gratitude, and then entice them to join his camp. Even if they did not say anything, those individuals would be rewarded in the future, and they would be more loyal than those who took the initiative to recruit them. Sven looked around with that thought in mind. He knew that many refugees would occasionally look at Watson while eating, their eyes filled with respect. If the people hated their leader, they would eventually be overthrown no matter how strong they were. On the contrary, if the people liked their leader, they would be elected king even if they accomplished nothing. That's how it is. Nightingale, young master, if you have no problems, let's go now. Watson did not want to continue that topic. He clapped his hands and looked at the people around him. I don't have any problems. Nightingale and the shadow guards nodded. They were there to help escort the things and also to monitor Black Moon Castle. Since Watson wanted to explore the ruins, they would have to go too. It was an excellent time to see what was in the ruins so that they could report to the border count. The astrologer shook his head. I'm not going. I'm tired and need to rest. Watson had just deprived him of 100 years of his life. Although it did not affect his strength, it did have an effect on his mood. Are you certain you will not go, Master? What if your cute disciple is in danger? Watson rubbed his right hand gently. A world tree branch wiggled out, and a translucent ring released colorful starlight from it. It just so happens that I can make one more wish with this ring. Perhaps I can wish for my master to accompany me. I wonder how many years of master's life would that cost? If Watson made a wish for him to go with them, it would take some years off his life. It was too painful. The astrologer frowned. It seemed like he had no choice but to go. Fine, I'll come with you. When do we set off? Now. Watson smiled and clapped his hands. The hundreds of thousands of magical beasts that were moving things around Black Moon Town immediately split into groups of 100,000. They turned around and laid down in the direction of the town. Watson twisted the ring on his right index finger, and he began to make a wish. I want to make a wish. I'm willing to use 10 years of my master's life in exchange for transporting me, my men, and the magical beasts I've chosen to the ancient ruins in the misty forest. A vast magic array appeared under the feet of Watson and the others, and it also enveloped the hundreds of thousands of magical beasts outside the town. All the refugees and the Black Moon Knights cast their gazes toward the commotion. Their faces were filled with shock. As the light flickered, Watson and the others, along with the magical beasts, disappeared. Only a few strands of white hair that had just fallen off remained in the air as it continued to fall, as well as a certain someone's rage. Gah, Watson, you little bee asterisk starred. You did this again? Chapter 190. What's wrong with that? At the misty forest. The misty forest was deafeningly quiet at the moment. Only the sound of falling snowflakes could be heard through the crevices between the branches and leaves. The ground was covered in thick snow, and the smudged footprints of magical beasts could be seen in the distance. A ray of light flashed across the ground in the midst of the silence, revealing a massive magical array. Watson, Sven, the astrologer, Nightingale, and 10 shadow guards appeared in the forest, followed by 100,000 magical beasts. The roar echoed across the sky, and the entire misty forest came to life in an instant. Watson, the astrologer, could not help but speak as soon as he exited the magical array, but he was interrupted by Watson. Master, look. Watson pointed in the direction of a nearby peak. The mountain was hundreds of meters high and completely covered with snow. Only a few exposed boulders revealed that the mountain was formerly green-gray. The ruined bandit gang had initially occupied that mountain as their base. It was also the location of Sven's discovery of the ancient ruins. The bandit gang had been established there to protect that secret because he had discovered the ruins. What's there to see? Is it not merely a mountain? The astrologer turned around to take a look and immediately turned back again. He was ready to talk about Watson. Even though Watson had made a wish to use up the astrologer's lifespan, and it did not affect him much, he could not go on like that. Watson had used up his lifespan. Who knew what he would next time? What if it were his internal organs? For example, he could use his eyeballs or a kidney. He did not doubt Watson would do that. He would probably think it was okay for the astrologer to lose one of his eyes and kidneys since he had 2 of each. Furthermore, his mater's immortal body would be as good as new if he were to commit suicide. Yes, Watson would use that as an excuse. The astrologer's scalp tingled when he thought about that. Master, that is not just a mountain. There are ruins at the bottom of that mountain. The rest is up to you, Master. Why are you looking at me? The astrologer was a little dazed. He heard Watson say, please use your magic to blast that mountain open. The astrologer was speechless. He was a little dumbfounded. That mountain was hundreds of meters high and stretched for several kilometers. He would be exhausted if he were to split it open. Master, that mountain should be no problem for you. I am confident that you can split it open. Are you sure you cannot do it? You should be aware that Miss Nightingale and the Fairy Castle's shadow guards are keeping an eye on you from the sidelines. Don't you want to show off your power as a platinum tier elite? Watson instantly changed the subject. He knew that the astrologer was upset with him because of what had happened. Just as the astrologer understood him, he also understood his master very well. The astrologer had no other interests and was only concerned with his reputation. The astrologer would not be indifferent after hearing what he said. It was certainly not easy to split such a large mountain. If the astrologer could vent his energy elsewhere, he would not get angry with him. Nightingale and the others glanced at the astrologer, their eyes wide with anticipation. They had never seen an attack by a platinum-tier elite. Isn't it merely a mountain? Of course, it is a piece of cake for me. The astrologer stroked his beard and feigned a cough, as predicted. He raised his hand and pointed to the mountain in front of him, and began to chant. A power deeper than darkness and heavier than mountains, the God who rules the mountains and the earth, please grant me your power and the gravity to crush all things. Platinum-tier earth elemental spell, black hole. As the chant ended, a small black ball floated on the astrologer's finger and rapidly enlarged. It quickly grew to a radius of several hundred meters and flew to the summit of the snow-covered mountain peak. It was as if a black mouth erupted on the mountain crest and devoured everything. Snowflakes began to fall and were absorbed by the black ball one by one. Then, with a shattering sound, the rocks broke and fell into the black hole. In a matter of minutes, the entire mountain summit began to crumble and was gradually consumed by the black hole. The mountain peak vanished, revealing a downward collapsing crack. The crack's surface was encircled by an unsettling green-gray fog that was thick with mystery. As one would expect from you, Master. You are so powerful. Watson clapped his hands to encourage the astrologer as he worked his magic. The astrologer remained silent. His hair and beard continued to flutter and curl upward as if he were a mage god. Nightingale, Sven, and the rest all gaped at the astrologer. Watson's 100,000 magical beasts were groveling even more on the ground. Under the astrologer's intense pressure, they did not even dare to breathe or whine. The astrologer had a gleeful expression on his face. That spell is merely ordinary among all the spells I have mastered. He seemed to be relaxed. The ruins beneath the mountain would not be able to withstand more powerful magic if I were to use it. Otherwise, I would only need one finger to raise that place to the ground. Really? Watson blinked. I feel that this spell is even stronger than the starfall spell that you taught me, Master. Does that mean that the starfall spell means nothing to you? Did you hide this from me, Master, because you did not want to try your best to teach me those spells? The astrologer almost passed out from holding his breath. He did not know what went on in Watson's head, but he was simply boasting. Why would Watson think that? Watson was the most serious pupil he had ever taught. Others would beg him to be their teacher. When he was in a good mood, he would teach them something they would be eternally thankful for, unlike Watson, who was still dissatisfied despite having received so much. That spell is not appropriate for you to cultivate at this moment. It is a little difficult. But didn't you say that the spell is very ordinary, Master? The astrologer's eyes widened. Even if he were to lose his dignity, it was better than Watson bugging him to learn new spells. Every time Watson learned magic, he would cause an uproar. The astrologer was terrified. All right, since you said so, Master. Watson nodded and did not dwell on that matter anymore. He turned around to face Sven. You are more familiar with that ruin, Sven. Can you tell me about the danger there? Based on my observations, that ruin should be between 1,000 and 1,500 years old, but because it is located underground, the ruin has been beautifully conserved. At the time, I only went to the first floor and removed the undead calamity staff. The second floor was densely packed with silver-tier magical beasts. I did not dare to go down, so I do not know anything about any threats there. At the time, the Tudor dynasty ruled over that land. They had so much land that their territory was almost half of the entire continent. Unfortunately, it was destroyed for unknown reasons. Look at the green-gray fog inside the crack. That's the unique aura of the undead spell. The astrologer had inadvertently approached Sven. He looked at the shape of the ruins and explained, the people of the Tudor dynasty worship the immortal god. They think that death is not the end, but rather the beginning. Therefore, after their nobles die, they would build an inverted triangle-shaped pyramid underground. According to the different levels of the pyramid, it would have at least 3 levels and a maximum of 9 levels. At the same time, they would also build a mountain peak on the ground as a monument. The top signifies the deceased's life achievements, while the bottom represents the deceased's purpose after their death. The underground pyramid would be as deep as the mountain peak on the surface. Your knowledge is very profound, as one would expect from an astrologer. Sven's face was filled with reverence. He had guarded that location for many years and had read numerous antique books. As a result, he knew one thing. The power of a platinum-tier elite was not just reflected in their strength. Then, according to your knowledge, Master, how deep would that underground ruin be? Watson asked. Looking at the mountain peak, it is at least 600 meters high. The underground pyramid should have approximately 6 levels. 6 stories are already considered extraordinary for a noble in the Tudor dynasty. 600 meters? Watson rubbed his chin and abruptly extended his right hand toward the crack on the ground. Platinum-tier earth elemental spell, the giant rock golem summon. More than 200-meter tall golems sprang up from the ground and shook the soil around their bodies. Their towering figures covered the weak sunlight, and their drill-like arms bore into the crack, immediately expanding it to a few hundred meters wide. There was a massive upside-down pyramid around 600 meters tall, just as the astrologer had said. The pyramid was encased in an unknown metal that emitted a faint glow. More than 20 giant rock golems grabbed the pyramid's protruding portion and pulled it out. Young Master Watson, I propose that we send in magical beasts to see if it is harmful or if there are any traps inside. After that, we can. What are you doing, young master? Sven was about to make a suggestion when Watson suddenly cast a spell to start excavating the ruins. His eyes widened. Watson could not possibly think of excavating up the ruins directly, could he? That was not what he had anticipated. Should they not let the magical beasts explore first and wait until there was no danger inside the ruins before they went in to take the treasure level by level? We'll know it when we see it. I am excavating the ruins. Watson commanded the giant rock golem to move while he looked at Sven in puzzlement. He wanted to save time. So, instead of entering the ruins and carefully exploring them, it was better to dig up the entire thing and move it back to Black Moon Castle. Was there a problem with that? Chapter 191. A Purge and a Fusion. Architecture. Ancient ruins of the Tudor dynasty. Background. An ancient building that was more than 1,200 years old. The interior of the building was buried with a platinum-tier mage of the Tudor dynasty and more than 10,000 people. Due to the effects of some mysterious ritual, any living creature that had been exposed to the building for a long time would be transformed into an undead creature. Danger level. Apart from the platinum-tier mage, there are also various triggering spells, such as poisonous smoke, quicksand, and dark arrows. The undead creatures will forever guard the platinum-tier mage's treasures. Anyone who tries to break in will become a pile of feces. As long as they don't break in, they will be safe. Watson's eyes were filled with information about the ruins that were buried in the dirt. He chose not to enter the ruins for the reasons stated above and because the system indicated that as long as he did not enter, there would be no danger. Then, he asked Sven, is there anything wrong with my mining method? It seems, there's nothing wrong. Sven's mouth twitched as though he did not know what to say. Exploring the ruins, in his opinion, meant entering the ruins to obtain treasures. Otherwise, how could it be termed an exploration? Those who claimed to be adventurers did so, as did the heroes and authors of adventure tales. No one did as Watson had done. He had moved the entire ruins. However, after careful consideration, Watson's method was not an issue. They could investigate the ruins whenever they wished if they moved the ruins. They were unafraid of the dangers inside, thanks to Black Moon Castle's power. No one had done it because the adventurers were not as strong as Watson, and powerful people despised doing such a thing. Sven, the astrologer, Nightingale, and a few shadow guards stared at Watson with an odd look on their faces. They had followed Watson into the ruins to discover what was inside and report back to the border count at the border. Watson's actions had entirely destroyed their hopes. Well, that issue with this ruin is solved. Sven, do you know any other ruins nearby? Watson had directed more than 20 giant rock golems to dig out the inverted pyramid from the crevices in the ground in less than 10 minutes. The 100-meter-tall giants were hauling hundreds of meters of magnificent buildings. They broke all the trees along the road, leaving massive pothole-like tracks on the ground. Watson continued with his questions as they walked deeper into the forest. He wanted to dig more ruins and study them when they returned to the castle. Watson, hold on. Nightingale stopped Watson, who wanted to leave the vast ruins, and said, why did you bring us here? It feels like we can't help you with anything. If you had planned to do that from the beginning, wouldn't it be better if you came here yourself? I'm not blaming you. At least tell me the purpose of bringing so many magical beasts and us. She knew Watson was not a person who did things for no reason, but she did not understand Watson's specific thoughts. She felt like she was there to see a show. Do not worry, Miss Nightingale. You will understand why I brought you and those magical beasts here soon. Sven, you have not answered my question, Watson said with a curious smile. Do you know any other nearby ruins? I apologize, young Master Watson. I really don't know about that. Sven shook his head. The ruins were a coincidence. Even though the legendary Misty Forest had many ancient ruins, there were magical beasts everywhere. Furthermore, most of the ruins were hidden in difficult-to-detect places, making it tricky to find them. What do you think, Master? When the astrologer noticed Watson's gaze, he snorted and replied, Do not ask me. I have been staying in the Star Temple and am unfamiliar with the border. Of course, I don't know much about the ruins here. Watson finally turned his gaze to Nightingale and the Shadow Guards. If any ruins were discovered in the Misty Forest, they would have been exploited long ago by the Border Count's subordinates. They would not have waited until then, and even if there were excavated antiquities, they presumably would not have notified him. In that case, I can only rely on myself. Watson sighed. Miss Nightingale, weren't you wondering why I brought so many magical beasts with us? I'll tell you now. He whistled to the 100,000 magical beasts as soon as he finished speaking. The sound traveled far and wide thanks to his combat aura. The magical beasts sprang from the ground and fled in all directions. They vanished quickly. Don't tell me you intend to utilize those magical beasts to help you find the ruins, Watson, Nightingale exclaimed. Miss Nightingale, you have figured out what I am trying to say so quickly. Yes, that's what I want to do. The magical beasts he had fused were his eyes and ears. He could let those magical beasts search the Misty Forest. Of course, the Misty Forest was very vast. It was not enough to rely on just 100,000 magical beasts. Watson was prepared to fuse all the remaining magical beasts in the forest. That approach could fully eradicate the magical beasts in the Misty Forest. People at the border would no longer be afraid of winter. Not only can I obtain the magical beasts and increase my strength, but I can also excavate the ruins. At the same time, I can also remove the problem with winter and make everyone at the border thank me. I don't know how many I can kill in one go. Watson pondered to himself, and the corners of his mouth curled upward to expose a smirk that indicated he had devised a strategy. Young Master Watson, you exceed my expectations every time. Sven took a deep breath. He had come here to see a few demoness bandit gang leaders doing well in Black Moon Castle recently. He did not want to be inferior to his rivals from the past, so he handed the ruins to claim credit in front of Watson. His ideas had diminished considerably by that point. He was more interested in seeing how far Watson could go. What type of miracle would that brilliant adolescent, whom even the astrologer admired, would achieve? Time whizzed by. Watson had been in the Misty Forest for a week. When compared to a week ago, the Misty Forest has changed dramatically. The undulating hills had all vanished, replaced by a few towering mountains that stretched into the clouds. They were like colossal pillars that had no end in sight. Watson had fused most of the hills in the Misty Forest because he felt the magical beasts were too slow in searching for the ruins, and the rocky mountain paths were difficult for them to traverse. The mountain range not only increased in height after the fusion, but the material was also different from before that. It glowed with platinum-colored light, and any rock that fell would be platinum tier. Watson resolved to encircle those mountains in the future. It would become the quarry for Black Moon Castle, and those rocks would last for decades. Watson also fused the plants on the summit and at the mountain's base because they obstructed his view. Watson heaped up the medicinal herbs that transformed into silver or gold tier herbs in another location, which would become Black Moon Town's future medicinal herb base. It was not an exaggeration to state that a person could eat the medical herbs there for several years. It was worth noting that among the medicinal herbs he had fused was a gold tier fruit called the ice essence. That was everyone's primary source of food for that week. The search for the ruins became much easier after Watson modified Misty Forest's terrains. Watson had identified and excavated more than a dozen entrances to the probable ruins in less than a week. Those ruins ranged from 500 to thousands of years. He transported them away with the help of the giant rock golems. There was not a single modification when the majority of the ruins were unearthed. It was not a surprise. There was no odd movement when the ruins were buried under the ground. They would not touch any mechanisms until they were entirely excavated. Of course, there would be no strange motions. The owners of all the ruins would not have thought that such a person would exist in the future. That person would dig out the entire ruins instead of entering them during their exploration. Only a minor fraction of the ruins were relocated. There were magical beasts that fled the place in fear. They were also easily handled by Watson and the astrologer, both of whom were at platinum tier. They had spent a week together, and Watson had carried out a great purge and fusion in the misty forest. The value he had gained was far beyond his imagination. At that moment, Watson stood in the deepest part of the misty forest, adjacent to the Dragonspine snow mountain. He commanded a few giant rock golems to excavate a vast ruin embedded in that mountain. Chapter 192. The Border Count's Arrival. The Dragonspine snow mountain, which resembled a lengthy dragon, spanned for an unknown number of kilometers. It separated the Holy Dragon Kingdom from the Winter Nation. Watson's excavated ruins were embedded in the snow mountain. They were not embedded but instead were frozen inside. The fog in the misty forest behind Watson had essentially dissipated as he stood at the foot of the mountain. The only thing visible was sparse and bare branches, as well as vacant land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Over 300,000 magical beasts scurried around. The weakest of those magical beasts was silver tier, while the strongest had a gold tier aura. Watson's previous week resulted in those magical beasts. Almost all magical beasts in the forest had been merged. Those beasts would no longer be a threat to the people at the border but would instead serve as Black Moon Castle's guardians. Watson had no idea how powerful Black Moon Castle had become. He reckoned that it would not be difficult to sweep across half of the border. He also had no idea where to put so many magical beasts. He thought it would be a waste to fuse them with Emperor Cluck and the Golden Flash. Furthermore, the daily food intake for such an enormous number of magical beasts was astronomical. It was a headache. Watson was well aware of the fusion system's flaws. It was too powerful. If one were overly powerful, it could sometimes produce problems. Watson gazed ahead, his thoughts calmed. A massive blue ice sculpture appeared on the mountainside in front of him. The ice sculpture had been around for an unknown amount of time. It seemed to be a magical stone. Its hardness was not at all inferior to that of platinum tier metal. A dark cave could be seen behind the ice sculpture, and its walls were covered in mysterious symbols. If I am not mistaken, those symbols should be runes from the Loan language, which existed over 10,000 years ago. Those runes were thought to be the words left behind by the gods in ancient times. It is thought that after completely interpreting them, one will discover the gods' secrets. I can only say that I have a basic comprehension of these runes. The astrologer remarked emotionally as he looked at the runes in front of him. Watson had initially taken him to the misty forest to excavate the ruins. He merely wanted to aid his adorable apprentice to carry out his plan to fortify Black Moon Castle. However, as Watson investigated the ruins one by one, he got increasingly drawn to those ancient ruins. It piqued his interest to explore them. The writings of the gods, the ancient ruins from 10,000 years ago. Nightingale's eyes shone as she gazed upon the old ruins in front of her. Those were priceless treasures. If they could be unearthed, the Border Count's power would undoubtedly be increased by many levels. The gods might have left some treasures behind too. They had been in the misty forest for a week, and she had not been idle over that week. She not only assisted Watson in excavating the ruins, but she also gathered information and used sophisticated techniques to relay it to the Border Count. She had planned to wait for Watson to retrieve the items from the ruins before she would pick out the essential locations and report them to the Border Count. However, after she saw Watson uproot the ruins, she realized that she could not possibly know what was in it. She might as well tell everything that transpired there to the Border Count and let him make his own decision. She calculated the time in her head. It looked like the Border Count would arrive soon. I am not sure how to get into the ruins. The magical stone at the entryway appears to be enchanted with self-destruction magic. If it is forcefully destroyed, the entire ruins will be obliterated. The astrologer spoke again. Sven, who was beside him, asked curiously, "You are very knowledgeable, Lord Astrologer. Don't you have a solution?" Even though I know that language, I can't think of a good solution for the time being." The astrologer shook his head, a concerned expression on his face. He was not omnipotent, and an ancient god had left behind that ruin. Watson stared at the ruin in front of him while the astrologer thought about it. The corresponding information appeared in his eyes. Building. The ruin of an ancient god civilization. An ancient structure dating back 10,000 years, in which some unknown creatures are sleeping. The ruins are etched with the Loan letters, which appear to be an incomplete magical formation. The hard ice at the entrance seems to be the result of a platinum tier spell, Absolute Zero. The mystical explosion within will be triggered by violent demolition. Danger level. Unknown. Those Loan characters depict magic? Not bad. Watson stroked his chin. He did not know any Loan characters, but the system could understand them. As he pondered that, the astrologer next to him talked to Sven. Sven inquired as to what was written on it. The astrologer stated that the runes could represent records of ancient gods' life. Watson was well aware that it was not the case. His master's comments about deciphering the runes appeared to be an exaggeration, but he did not expose him. Watson's eyes reflected the magic stone at the door, as well as the writing on the wall. Magic stone with the Absolute Zero spell. Releases extreme cold that can freeze time, causing platinum tier large-scale damages. The magic carved on the cave walls was a spell called the Frozen World's Silver Moon, but unfortunately, it was incomplete. Incomplete spell. The Frozen World's Silver Moon summons a moon, and the space covered by the moonlight will be frozen. The incomplete spell was a platinum tier spell. It was hard to imagine the spell's effect in its complete form. Perhaps it was a diamond tier spell. Watson could only think that to himself. Then, he heard the system's notification sound. A spell that can be fused has been detected. Would you like to fuse it? Fuse. When Watson chose to fuse it, the massive magical stone in front of him began to vibrate. The astrologer's expression changed abruptly. What did you do, Watson? This is not good. The magic stored in that stone is going to erupt. Everyone, we have to go now. Even an astrologer as powerful as him could not keep calm because it was an ancient god's ruins. Sven, Nightingale, and the others' expressions also changed, and they stepped back without hesitation. Only Watson waved his hand calmly. Master, everyone, please don't panic. I have removed the magic here. It's fine. The magic stone collapsed at a rapid speed as soon as he spoke. The Absolute Zero spell contained within the stone was not released. Instead, they morphed into enigmatic symbols that floated through the air. The words on the cave wall also disappeared and turned into mysterious glowing substances. They fused with the symbols from the Absolute Zero spell and entered Watson's body. Congratulations, Master, for obtaining the Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnation, a peak platinum tier spell that can summon an illusory moon. Any creature touched by the moonlight will be sucked into its body and soul, forever imprisoned within the spell. The more flesh and soul it absorbs, the more powerful the spell will be. There is no upper limit. There is no upper limit to that spell? Watson blinked. There was a strange expression on his face. That was the first time he had heard of such a spell. Would that spell make someone infinitely stronger? Could an Iron Tier elite kill a Platinum Tier warrior? That should not be the case. Watson did not experiment with that spell. Instead, he cast a Platinum Tier Earth Elemental spell and summoned a giant rock golem in front of everyone's astonished eyes. He was ready to excavate the ruins. There are already 2 types of spells carved on the outside, and more might have been carved on the interior. Won't we make a fortune if we transfer the entire ruins? Those were all magic left over from the era of the gods. Perhaps they would find many more lost spells that no longer existed. The ruins are connected to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. If you dig it out so rashly, it might trigger an avalanche on the top of the mountain. Aren't you afraid of that? An unexpected voice echoed from behind Watson just as he was about to enter the ruins. When he looked around, he spotted a man with purple hair and sharp ears. His face was so beautiful that it did not look like a human's, and he was expressing himself with a mix of humor and seriousness. The man fixed an incomprehensible and scrutinizing look on him. It made his hair stand on end. Even though that was the first time Watson had seen the man, he knew that he must be the so-called Fairies Count, who was also the Border Count, Lord Sylvan. Chapter 193. Watson could not accept it. Sylvan felt distressed. He received a letter from Nightingale about 3 days ago while he was in Fairy Castle. A flying elemental magical beast delivered it. The letter stated that Watson had taken the astrologers to explore the misty forest and had uncovered many ruins. Black Moon Town was also recruiting refugees. They had more than 100,000 people under their protection. That amounted to around 1/10 of the total number of refugees at the border. Many people who knew about it appreciated Black Moon Castle's good deeds, and some people in Fairy Castle even praised them. The following were the maids' conversations that Sylvan overheard on the way to the toilet. One maid said, "I heard that a new power, Black Moon Castle, has appeared on the border and is recruiting refugees. If they joined them, they'd be safe from the magical beasts, and they can eat and drink for free too. I heard that the food there is better than the food in Fairy Castle." Then, another maid said, "Your news is outdated. According to what I heard, the food in the Black Moon Castle is not only better than the food cooked here, but the ingredients are also first class and expensive. They eat silver tier magical beasts meat and ginseng of the same grade. That is a silver tier ingredient. Even Lord Sylvan only eats it once during the festival." The first maid asked, "How do you know so much about Black Moon Castle?" The other maid replied, "A relative of mine was attacked by magical beasts during the winter and hid in Black Moon Castle. I just received a letter from her in the morning. She said she had gained 10 kilograms in Black Moon Castle in the past few days, and her strength had also changed from iron to bronze tier. I had wanted to bring her to Fairy Castle, but she refused to come now. She said Fairy Castle couldn't compare to Black Moon Castle. I'm really envious of her." That year's winter was different from usual. The magical beasts were not only exceptionally powerful, but they were also more intelligent. As the border count, Sylvan had to protect his territory and send men to save other manors on the border. Every year, that was a routine occurrence. Sylvan would dispatch troops to those manor owners in need. In exchange, the manor owners would provide Sylvan with money for protection. However, due to the arrival of Black Moon Castle that year, the manor owners returned all of the guards that he had sent them. It would be costly to seek Sylvan's assistance, but with Black Moon Castle, they would not only save money, but they would also be able to eat and drink for free. At first glance, the decision was obvious. Many manor owners even decided to demolish their manor and relocate their entire family nearer to Black Moon Castle. They would be neighbors with Watson once winter passed. The astrologer was very depressed but helpless about that. He had admitted to the astrologer that Watson was his son. It was not appropriate to suppress him at that time. Furthermore, Black Moon Castle had adopted a large number of refugees. If he acted rashly, it would only cause chaos among the people. One could only say that Watson had made a good move. He was concerned about how he would deal with Watson and Black Moon Castle. He was well aware that if the trend persisted, he would lose control of the border. However, there was no other option. Then, he received Nightingale's letter. He wanted to see how many ruins Watson had unearthed. He wanted a cut of the spoils. Then he would use identity as a father to urge Watson to be careful. It was simply ideal. That was what Sylvan had in mind as he dashed across the border. At that moment, Sylvan assessed the youth in front of him. He had brown wavy hair and eyes the color of the azure sea. His body released waves of magical elements as powerful as a platinum tier elite. His arms and legs were also exceptionally strong, with explosive strength. One could see his attainments in body cultivation. Furthermore, Watson's physique had some kind of strange power that caused him to feel a sense of crisis. Watson was the only person who could threaten him across the entire border, other than the astrologer. Those who can be regarded as master's disciples are not ordinary individuals, as one might think. His skill may be even greater than mine if he can achieve such results at such a young age. He felt that way because of Watson and what he had seen and heard along the road that had made him nervous. Misty Forest's previously luxuriant trees had been hollowed out, and the hills had vanished, transformed into towering pillars. Only a barren plain connected to the Dragonspine snow mountain remained. The dense fog forest was rich in resources. Under normal circumstances, it would not be a problem to use it for hundreds of years. It was hard to imagine that someone could use a week to empty all the resources there. If he had not seen hundreds of thousands of magical beasts running on the plain, Sylvan might suspect that he had found the wrong place. Furthermore, those supernatural beasts were not typical creatures. They were at the very least silver tier, with tens of thousands of gold tier magical beasts amongst them. If those magical beasts were to be released, it would be an unspeakable calamity for the entire border. Even Fairy Castle's strength would be insufficient to stop them. All of those magical beasts obeyed Watson's commands, which made Sylvan ponder it. He had a grudge against the king, and revenge required strength, and those hundreds of thousands of magical beasts would undoubtedly be of great help to him. With a meaningful expression in his eyes, Sylvan smiled and patted Watson's shoulder. As I've just told you, Watson, if the ruins in the Dragonspine Snow Mountain are excavated hastily, the mountain may collapse and trigger an avalanche. The only solution is to employ magic to fill the excavated area. And I happen to be very good at earth elemental spells, so please allow me to assist you as a father. Sylvan said the word father loudly. He reminded Watson not to resist him and to pay heed to his identity. His identity as a father? Watson scratched his head and looked confused. Who was Sylvan's child? Why would he tell him that? He even deliberately emphasized it. Was his child amongst his group of men? Watson looked around and finally saw Nightingale. She was the only one who echoed the characteristics of Sylvan's child. Nightingale is the border count's child? Well, it's not impossible. Watson stroked his chin. Even though Sylvan looked young, probably about 30 years old, the elves' bloodline was different from humans. Elves could live for a long time, and their appearance would hardly change. While Watson pondered that, the astrologer walked forward. At first, he glared at Watson angrily, as if he blamed Watson for taking matters into his own hands. Then, he turned to look at Sylvan. Your sense of smell is really sharp, Sylvan. I did not intend to tell you that. So, who told you? If I'm not wrong, it must be Miss Nightingale, right? Nightingale dropped her head in embarrassment after the astrologer called her out. Sylvan, on the other hand, appeared unconcerned. Master, I have complete command over the border. Is there anything I shouldn't know about this? After all, we're a family. I came to check on the progress of the exploration of the ruins and to provide a hand. What is the problem? He emphasized the word family. Fine. You are, after all, his father. I will not meddle in your family matters. The astrologer waved his hand. But you came at the right time. I don't know what kind of danger is in those 10,000-year-old ruins. I was worried, but with your help, there should be no problem. Don't worry, Master. I'll do my best. If we discover any treasure in there, I only want 3/10 of it. As for the other ruins that have been excavated, I want 1/10. Do you have any objections, Master? Sylvan raised a finger. He thought he was already very generous. It would be unreasonable not to give him some benefits when they excavated the ruins right under his nose. The astrologer nodded. I have no objections. Suddenly, a young voice echoed from the side. I have an objection. Watson raised his hand. Of course, he had an objection. He painfully excavated all of those ruins. The process may not be complex, but the border count did nothing, and he wanted to share the benefits. Why? Who was Nightingale's father? Chapter 194. The Battle with the Border Count. You have an opinion about that, Watson? Sylvan narrowed his eyes. His expression did not change, but his eyes were filled with danger. My opinion is that Lord Sylvan should go back to where he came from. We don't need your help to excavate the ruins. These ruins belong to Black Moon Castle. I won't give you even a single hair, let alone 1/10 of it. Watson spoke with a puffed chest. If it were in the past, he might have admitted defeat when he saw the border count. Back then, he did not have the strength, but things had changed. Even without the help of the astrologer, he could still fight against Sylvan with his 2 peak platinum tier items. Hiss. Those powerful words caused a great uproar. Nightingale and the Shadow Guards did not say anything. They stared at Watson in shock. Sven also opened his mouth and then laughed. He could not even say such words to Sylvan. It clearly did not leave Sylvan with any dignity, but it seemed like something Watson would do. The astrologer could not do anything, he just shook his head. In his opinion, it was a quarrel between father and son. The two of them were family, so it would be the same if any one of them excavated the ruins. He did not expect that Watson would not even address Sylvan as a father, he addressed him as the border count. It seemed very distant. After he thought about it carefully, he figured it was not a surprise. After all, Sylvan had left him in someone else's home. I am a tolerant person, but I can get angry too. The corners of Sylvan's mouth twitched. The price of enduring my anger is terrifying. Watson, I will give you another chance. Take the initiative to hand in 30% of the things that you have already excavated. Also, to prevent the magical beasts from harming the border, you must hand them to me for management. Watson had previously gotten the astrologer to hint at him that he wanted to become his illegitimate child. He had cooperated and admitted to that and had even given him many gifts. Why would Watson refuse him when he asked for some benefits? That child must not know what was good for him. Sylvan decided to teach him a lesson. Watson was also enraged. Sylvan had presented him with a bunch of trash. He had given him a platinum tier item, but Watson had to use the world tree's branches to fuse a new one. Then, the man came and asked for too many benefits. He did not only want treasures from the ruins but the magical beasts as well. Watson thought it was too much of an ask. The hundreds of thousands of silver-tier magical beasts and the treasures in the ruins were worth more than tens of millions of gold coins. Those were not comparable to the gift of 200,000 gold coins that the border count had given him. Lord Sylvan, what if I don't agree with that? Well, if you want to bear my anger, you'll have to pay a huge price. The best method to deal with disobedient children is to beat them up. Only when their body is in pain will they realize what they can and cannot do. Sylvan's face was solemn as he spoke. He extended his right hand toward Watson. There were 5 rings on his fingers, and they were lit at that point. I already gave you 5 rings. Return those 5 rings to me because you go against my wishes. He had only given Watson 5 of those rings because he had left a special magical imprint on them. He could summon them back from Watson at any time. After all, they were platinum tier items, and they were extremely precious to him. He had never intended to give them to Watson in the first place. As he moved, the light from the rings on his fingers spread out and fused into his body. It caused his aura to become 5 times stronger. At the same time, Watson's body moved with it, but there was no reaction after only one move. Huh? Sylvan was taken aback. According to the magic he had engraved on them, the rings should have left Watson's body and returned to his hands by then. He could only make one wish with the Nibbling rings. Watson would have no choice but to comply as long as he wished for him to submit to him. There was also a gap among platinum tier elites. Someone like him could kill Watson easily. The prerequisite was to summon the ring. Huh? Where are my rings? Why aren't they reacting? Not only could the ring not be detected, but neither could the magical imprint that he had left behind. Sylvan's magic gestures toward Watson continued to shift. He was perplexed as to what had happened. Did Watson not have those rings on him? That should not be the case. Even if the rings were not with him, he would still be able to find them as long as they were within the border. Unless, are you looking for this? Watson had no choice but to take a battle stance when he realized Sylvan was ready to attack him. Sylvan, however, surprised him by not releasing any powerful magic. Instead, for some unfathomable reason, he gestured toward him. He stretched his palm outward after staring at it for a moment. A branch grew from his hand, and a dazzling, wriggling ring hung from it. This is... Sylvan's demeanor shifted. He could sense that the ring Watson wore had the same aura as the Nibbling rings, but it was not the same. This is a peak platinum tier tool that I created after I fused the 5 Nibbling rings. It's the wish for the world ring, Watson explained casually. Are you joking? Sylvan looked doubtful. Nightingale had told him that Watson had perfected a fusion skill that could fuse 2 weapons to boost their quality. On the other hand, the Nibbling rings were platinum tier items, and it was too heaven-defying to fuse a weapon of that level. It's true, I can attest to that. The ring Watson created is platinum tier, and it's even stronger than the previous Nibbling rings. You can make 3 wishes, and each wish would only cost half of the price. The astrologer's voice boomed from somewhere nearby. 3 wishes? Sylvan's mouth opened slightly. An ability to make 3 wishes at half price was equivalent to 6 times the effect of the Nibbling rings. He did not know how Watson did it or if the astrologer had helped him. His master might have helped the child. Sylvan found solace in his heart. His master had given him the Nibbling rings, and no one knew it better than his master. If the astrologer had modified that ring, it would not be surprising if he could make 3 wishes. Of course, it was not the time to think about that. He thought of a severe problem. Watson had fused a new ring, so the 5 rings in his hand could no longer form a perfect nibbling ring. As if to test his idea, Watson's voice echoed from the other side. "Lord Sylvan, please don't be so stingy with your next gift. It would be better if you gave me a complete item, or else I would have to fuse it myself. Now that I've fused the rings, you won't be able to use your other 5 nibbling rings anymore." "Ignorant brat, shut up." Sylvan's anger surged. He gave up on using the item and began to chant. Draping the true red battle armor over his body, the destructive fire of calamity churned in his palm. Forging the giant sword into a new shape, the sound of the chiming was like an epitaph. "Cleave the divine court, forge the stars." Platinum tier fire elemental spell, Vermilion Nova. A red dot soared from his finger and into the sky. A closer look revealed that it was not a red dot but a space that had collapsed to the extreme. Then the whole collapsed, and endless flames shot out from within it and burned the entire sky into ashes. The ice on the Dragonspine snow mountain, which had not melted all year round, quickly melted to reveal the bare black rocks underneath it. There was a sea of fire above his head. As his feet took a step forward, dragon-shaped flames wrapped around his torso. It made him look like a fire god that had descended into the world. His eyes flashed a dark crimson light, and he pointed at Watson. The sea of fire that covered the sky poured down instantaneously and transformed into a pillar of fire that coiled around Watson. "Sylvan, what are you doing? You activated your strongest self-created platinum tier spell, Vermilion Nova. Do you want to kill Watson? He is your..." The astrologer's expression changed. Sylvan interrupted him before he could finish. "I know, Master. That's why I want him to understand what it means to be obedient." Vermilion Nova was a spell that he created by simulating the explosion of a star. The temperature of the flames exceeded 10,000 degrees Celsius. Even a diamond tier elite's body would melt if they stood still and let it burn. He had used all of his strength in that spell. If Watson were willing to give in, he would withdraw 50% of his force. He promised that he would only make Watson miserable and not let him die. He wanted Watson to face the harsh reality. There was a stark difference between a platinum tier elite like him and a veteran platinum tier elite like Sylvan. Sylvan almost smiled when he saw the flames envelop Watson's body. At that moment, a tender voice came from within the fire. Absolute zero. The flames that had filled the sky were suddenly extinguished. Watson had escaped unscathed. His body emitted an aura that could stop time. Even the air solidified into ice crystals and rushed towards Sylvan. Chapter 195. You can be proud of yourself. Absolute Zero was a platinum tier ice elemental spell, and it was not only that. The essence of the spell was to control magical elements. It used space and time to freeze them. It was considered a fusion spell because the Golden Flash had that spell. Therefore, Watson was very familiar with it. You mastered a high-tier spell? Absolute Zero? Sylvan seemed a little surprised. Watson, he thought, was already excellent enough to be on the verge of platinum at that age. He had not expected Watson to be so knowledgeable about platinum-tier spells. He had underestimated his adversary. Unfortunately, he did not realize it until it was too late. Sylvan extended his right hand toward Watson. The dragon-shaped flames around his body immediately flew in the direction of Watson in an attempt to stop the cold air's approach. Unfortunately, it was useless. The thick and long fire dragon flew more than 10 meters in front of Watson before it began to collapse and shrink. The flames had weakened. It was only the size of a hand when it came in front of Watson, and the boy blew on it. Kacha, kacha. The sound of freezing rang out, and the ice permanently trapped the flames. Who had ever a flame that encased in ice? The fire that was no longer burning was like a work of art in the center of the ice block. Cold breath spewed from his mouth. Watson's hair and brows were encrusted with frost. His body could not endure that even as a gold-tier warrior. Even as a spell caster, he had ended in such a state. Sylvan, who was in the middle of the attack, was in an even worse predicament. A layer of frost had formed on his garments and limbs before the flame on his body was extinguished. He gritted his teeth. That forced Sylvan to retreat rapidly. He enhanced the transfer of the magical power, but it was still ineffective in slowing the spread of ice on his body. Wait, Watson, let's pause that battle for a moment. Lord Sylvan, you initiated the conflict, and now you want to stop it. Don't you think you talk too much? Unfortunately, I do not intend to quit until the winner is determined. I recently learned a platinum tier fusion spell, and I'll let you test its power. Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnation. Watson chanted a difficult and mysterious language. It was not the present-day language but a language from 10,000 years ago, the Loan language. No one in the room understood it. They could only sense the power in those words. The language was swift and smooth, and Watson quickly completed the spell. The sky's original flaming red tint faded and was replaced with a silver-white color. An enormous illusory moon that spanned for hundreds of meters appeared in the midst of the silver-white light. Sylvan's movements were slowed when the moonlight gathered into a pillar and surrounded him. The moon was clearly visible at the foot of the Dragonspine snow mountain. Sylvan's body was encased in frost, and the ice on his body swiftly thickened at that instant, thanks to the illusory moonlight. He had turned into an ice sculpture before he could resist it. He looked lifelike inside the ice sculpture as he maintained his escape posture. What, Lord Sylvan lost? Nightingale opened her mouth wide as she gazed at Sylvan's ice sculpture. She wished she could say something, but she could not. She felt a chill in her spine, and her thoughts became foggy. It was difficult to think. The moon in the sky seemed to have dragged her spirit away. The majority of the shadow guards were like that as well. The moonlight shone not only on Sylvan but on everyone in the room. The light engulfed everyone, magical beasts and the astrologer alike, and their ability to think and move had been reduced. The astrologer was the first to lift the restriction. A layer of brilliant starlight was found on his body, and it obstructed the moonlight in the sky. He flashed in front of Watson and stared at him strangely. Watson felt goosebumps all over his body. Master, why are you looking at me like that? Watson, you know the Loan language from 10,000 years ago, and you even know how to use it to chant a spell. I have studied the Loan language for a long time, but even I could not do that. How did you learn to do that? He was the most knowledgeable mage in the kingdom. How could Watson know something that even he did not know? The Loan language was distinct from their language then. It was a powerful language. A spell cast in that language was more powerful than a typical spell. That had something to do with the essence of magic, which by nature, sought resonance with the world through its own magical elements and the manner it was chanted. The language was merely a vehicle for resonance. The degree of resonance between various languages and the world varied. For example, dragon language magic, unique to the dragon race, was far more potent than the magic that humans had mastered. That was because the dragon language was older, more mysterious, and more powerful than human language. The Loan language was one of the most powerful of all languages. After all, that was the tongue in which the gods previously conversed. Unfortunately, it was too old, and most of the language was lost. Aside from the language, the astrologer was shocked by the platinum tier spell that Watson had unleashed. He had not taught Watson such a potent spell. Perhaps Sylvan had done that? The astrologer turned to face Sylvan and promptly discarded that notion. Sylvan was frozen. How could it have gotten so bad if he had taught Watson that? Master, from whom did you learn the Loan language? I accidentally learned it while I was gazing at the content on the ruins' walls. Accidentally? Those words stung the astrologer. He held his forehead and sighed. All right, let's just take it as what it is. He might not have trusted Watson a few days earlier, but after he saw what Watson had done, he no longer had any qualms about that. His apprentice was a brilliant student who could learn everything in an instant. He had even figured things out by looking at the Loan language. Was there an issue with that? That kind of language has an enormous impact on the development of magic in the kingdom. I need to find an opportunity to ask Watson for the complete version of the language. The astrologer made up his mind and immediately felt a little emotional. He had not taught Watson in a few days, and then he had to learn from his disciple. He was not a qualified master. Master, we can talk about the runes later. Let's solve the problem in front of us first. I just learned the spell to freeze the border count. I'm not very familiar with it, so I can't undo it. Do you have a solution, Master? Watson's voice interrupted his thoughts. When he looked up, he noticed Watson pointing to the frozen Sylvan nearby. He looked a little uncomfortable, as if he was worried that Sylvan would die. On the one hand, he wanted to test the spell that he had just learned. On the other hand, he felt that the border count was too powerful, so he did not hold back. He did not expect he could freeze the man so easily. According to the silver moon of endless reincarnations description, the moon in the sky would absorb Sylvan's soul and become stronger. It would be weird if he accidentally killed Sylvan. Don't worry about him, he is not that weak, the astrologer said indifferently. Yes, I am not that weak to be killed by a child. The voice came from behind him. Watson's pupils contracted. He turned around and found a slender hand in front of his eyes. It quickly enlarged, and a finger tapped on his forehead heavily. With a muffled sound, Watson took more than 10 steps backward. He felt his mind go blank, and his soul was about to be separated from his body. Watson, this is payback for the spell you cast on me. If I did not know the time-stripping spell, that attack might have injured me. The only person on the entire border who can force me to that extent is you, Watson. You can be proud of yourself. Watson struggled to shake his head. He raised his head to see Sylvan standing in front of him. His purple hair had become white and had a faint glow. Even though his lashes and brows had assumed the color of light, they twisted upward in a way that defied gravity. The absolute zero spell that sealed Sylvan had already turned into a sea of ice fragments.